Philippines-Singapore chapter, headed by their ever reliable chapter president, Architect Mark Lester Valignota, District B1 Council, and of course, in coordination with the UAP Regional District Director, Architect Luis Domalaon. Thank you so very much, guys, for always having me. And I feel great that I've been joining the team for the past few days, and so far, you've been welcoming me with all with all your heart. So thank you very much. And to our sponsors, our generous sponsors, thank you to Connext, Angeline, Unitech, Davis Paints, Tongson Law Offices, VK5 Solutions PTE Limited Singapore, and Adapt Star Lab. Thank you so very much for sponsoring and making sure that your help makes this webinar series possible. All right, so I guess we're all ready. Everyone is here. Press mark. Can you hear me? Okay, I hope everyone can hear us. And I'd like to begin by calling someone to welcome us all. Okay, and this guy is very hardworking. I believe since I joined the group, I've been a witness of how he's very hands-on when it comes to the program of the United Architects of the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, for the opening remarks, I'd like to call on the Manila Sampaloc Chapter President, Architect Chandru Liana.
Good afternoon. A pleasant hello to everyone. We have heard it again and again that we, mankind, has improved the way of life, but also has severely damaged our home, Mother Earth. Now, with our experiences on the effects of these damages through disasters, crises, and pandemics, we are making collective efforts to combat this decline in our world. The United Architects of the Philippines is giving its share on this cause by educating its members through webinars like this and many other platforms. I would like to congratulate UAP Singapore chapter headed by Architect Mark Balignota, my good friend, for their numerous and beneficial programs. They are not just keeping these to themselves, but they are generously sharing this to the whole membership of the UAP. So on behalf of District B1, where UAP Singapore and my chapter, Manila Santa Mesa, belong, with the leadership of our present District Director, Architect Luis Dumalaon, I welcome you all to this event, Green Architecture, the Impact of the Living Environment. I hope you would all enjoy the lectures, and I am optimistic that our work to heal the world will be successful.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Architect Chandru, for the very warm welcome. And yes, I agree. We will heal as one. Okay. Well, let's get started. And our first topic, guys, is about rethinking sustainable design by creating an architecture of resilience for current times. And you may be wondering, what does resilience have to do with architecture? Well, we all know that we can't design for every unpredictable event like what's currently happening nowadays, but we can make sure our built environment that we live in is better able to weather this pandemic. We all have to do our part. And yes, like what Mufasa said in the movie Lion King, we are all connected in the great circle of life. So I'd say no worries. Hakuna Matata. Well, let's cut to the chase because I'm very excited to listen and learn from our speakers. And I would like to introduce to you all these two gentlemen who will tell us more about resilience in the context of architecture and how to integrate this into our practice. Well, the first guy is an architect registered with the Board of Architects in Singapore. With over 14 years of experience, he has led significant projects in Singapore, Vietnam, India, and Indonesia. As council member of the Singapore Institute of Architects, he co-chaired the Young Architects League for 3 years during his tenure and spearheaded parametric design competitions and architectural community events and was key to the Institute's CSR or corporate social responsibility efforts. He lectures on sustainable construction and life cycle costing at the Singapore University of Social Sciences and recently won the 2020 Tetler Design Awards for Best Tropical Design. He believes in creating beautiful solutions in bringing the projects he handles from conceptualization to built reality. Ladies and gentlemen, a man of positive influence, architect Luther Seat. Architect
Hi,
Luther, how is it
hi,
going?
thank you. Hi, thanks for the really nice introduction and good afternoon, President Mark and friends of UAP, architects and friends from all around. So thank you for this time this afternoon with us. We're happy to share our work and share our experiences. I wouldn't say to lecture or anything, but I would like to reach out as fellow architects and in this goal for sustainability. So I hope you enjoy the lecture coming up. And I'll be doing this together with architect Javier. So yes, thank you.
All right. Well, it's our pleasure to have you to this afternoon. And having said that, I'd like to also introduce our next guy. Well, he is a registered architect with more than 8 years experience and having studied and practiced in China, Africa, Singapore, and Spain, where he now resides. He has led projects ranging from master planning, mixed use, high-rise residential, educational, luxury housing, hotels, and commercial buildings. He is also a talented designer with strong conceptual skills, delivering high quality projects through to completion. He believes on the importance to positively give back to the world in which we live by designing bespoke solutions for each project he comes across. A critical thinker and problem solver. Ladies and gentlemen, architect Javier Perez Cuadrado de Santiago.
Hi, hello. Thanks a lot for inviting us here. Yes, good morning from Spain, good afternoon for you guys, and good night wherever you are. But yeah,
Buenos dias.
buenos dias.
All right. Well, we're all ready. So let's hear it from the two guys at this point. So, Architect Javier and Architect Seat, you may now start with with your speech or with your lecture.
Jonathan, I will be sharing a screen. So do you see my screen now, or I have to? You don't see it now, right?
We can see your face right now. We can.
Okay. So I will share now. Do you see now the screen?
Yes,
All right,
it's flash
perfect.
on the screen now.
All right.
All right. Yeah, go. You go.
No, so as thanks so much for this warm welcoming and this presentation. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to share with you our thoughts in this presentation. It's a great pleasure.
Yes, I would like to just say that this co-lecturing is pretty fresh to us. I'm doing this the first time lecturing with Javier at the same time, but it's a little bit like our practice of sharing design because now we are running a practice together along with our co-founder Phil, who's not here today. But the three of us, we design online over Dropbox on the internet, just like what we're doing now. So it's something that we would like to share with everyone as well. That this was something we were doing before the pandemic hit us, and now that we are still online and not having a physical presence, this sort of strengthens this model of working together. So we'd like to share some of the works that has been going on while the pandemic hit us, and how we were dealing with it as it hit us in different ways in different regions as well, in Singapore and in Spain, and the lessons that are learned between, and so you'll see them in the slides coming up.
Today we will share three different approaches for sustainable design. We'll talk about building local, integrating outdoor spaces with architecture, and going green with refurbishment. So we believe that building local is very important in recent times. So implementing local workforce, materials, products is key to the resilience of the industry. With the new norm, we now spend a lot of time in our homes. So it's important to create micro environments where people can experience indoor and outdoor. The challenge of doing refurbishments is the amount of time and work required. However, this will lead to a careful implementation of sustainability over a building's life cycle. So
yeah, so we have a sustainable design framework that we abide whenever we put our practice into designing, whether it's small homes, refurbishments, mixed-use developments that are bigger in scale. We're all familiar with the design process, starting from feasibility all the way to construction. And sometimes it's a very linear process, and we take this through sometimes in a very quick way, especially when a client has a very quick timeline. But it's important to pause and think about the building, about sustainability while doing it at all stages. Because as the stages proceed from something more generic to more detailed and implementation, there are windows of opportunities to make key decisions that will impact the building life cycle. So this building life cycle assessment is an important one. I mean, it sounds very, it's like a big systems chart here, but it might be as simple as thinking of what material to use, whether to use a timber floor or to use a tile, what are the considerations other than cost and how it looks like, and like the lifespan of such materials. When you use them, will they require a lot of maintenance? When you select this material, how is this material made? Is it made with a lot of embodied energy, a concept that I will share a little bit more on? So such decisions are important as we all design from feasibility when we meet with the client or the developer to set the goals of sustainability from the start, because they might cost some money up front. They might not cost at all. It might be a decision about introducing the use of daylight sensibly, but some big decisions are made from the start. And I think along the way through design, we want to constantly remind ourselves as architects, as developers, to make sure that the impact to the environment in the process of construction, in the process of the building when it's in use is as minimal as possible. So this framework guides us whenever we design. And so we like to share this as the framework that guides our design process. So yeah, I mentioned that the three of us, we get together. We used to sit in the same office in Singapore. With Jay, who's also part of your team in UAP. That's how we got involved here. And so because ever since our project finished here, we were working on an airport together in Singapore. And so Javier is back in Spain and Phil is in London. But we carried on working together in sessions like this. We would have design sessions that we call tapas. Javier will explain why he called this tapas later.
The only difference with tapas is that we don't have food. We have tapas, but without food. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I will take a glass of wine and design. But I think the beautiful thing about that is I think we're expanding less resources, having no physical office, and perhaps no aircon, printing, everything is sketched online on screen, and I think as consultants that's possible, and I would say some of you might be already doing that, and we're open to collaborations, and so we operate like a cloud. In fact, our servers are on Dropbox. So coming together and working, having lectures like this online, can practice of architecture be fully online in a huge way, not just 3 persons, but 45, and I think that's more and more possible. So that's what I wanted to share.
Okay, so let's start with building local. So we have to think on how do we design nowadays. This is an example of Dubai. I'm sure you know that it's a city in the middle of the desert, but it has huge skyscrapers with curtain walls, a lot of glass, and it's not a very pedestrian-friendly city. It requires the car for almost absolutely everything. So what we could have learned from other older traditional cities, like for example Sana'a is the capital of Yemen. The way urban planning works is buildings are a lot closer to each other, so the streets have have shadow where people can walk, and the temperature is much lower in those streets. Um, the partitions, the walls of these buildings are much thicker, windows are smaller, and even buildings have internal patios where people can spend their time during the hottest hours of the day. There are also examples like the Atap House in Singapore with the pitch roof, which works perfectly with the heavy rain there, and the also the piling on the structure, the way it works. So it's not so floodings don't affect directly the interior of the house. So many lessons that can be learned from the past.
So we go into material selection and about why we raise this topic of when we say building local, and here you have a building of steel and glass. Okay, I wouldn't say steel and glass, but metal and glass, right? You have aluminum, and which is a very common used material. In fact, in the past projects that I have been working on, aluminum is one of the main features in curtain wall, in cladding. When I was working on the airport, there was, well, the whole box was clad in aluminum. If not, it was glass, which had aluminum extrusions. So we want to think a little bit about how aluminum came about. And if you see, based on this study, the embodied carbon of building materials is actually the sum, well, all the energy required to produce that material. So meaning that what you see, uh, let's say a piece of wood, you have to go to the tree, chop it, and that tree might not be in the same country as you are. Once it's chopped and it's processed and it's delivered and packaged, there's a lot of time spent, vehicles spent in transporting those materials back and forth. So, well, but that is usually not reflected fully in the cost of the material. Sometimes the material is cheap. It doesn't mean that there was little carbon used to produce it. So indulge me a little bit here. I just wanted to share this because I was at a few factories during the process of some projects I worked on, like the gallery and the airport, and I went to some aluminum factories, window factories, glass factories. So I just like to talk about aluminum and how aluminum is actually created. So again, I'm not a scientist, but I just wanted to see the extent of how people would create something. And here you have bauxite ore on the left, that piece of rock there. It's actually mined around the world. The biggest mine is in Australia. And you have mines in China as well and in Europe, but the biggest mine is Australia. But to get alumina out of that, which is that white substance, Javier keeps saying that white substance is something else, but it's alumina that is extracted from the ore. But in the process of extraction is a very heat intense one. But then that's not it, because from that white powdery substance called alumina, it is smelted to produce aluminum ingots, which is like the bars of aluminum on the right. So these aluminum ingots, they are then melted and put into billets, right? These long cylinders of aluminum, because these have been pushed through dies to become extrusions. So I was at somewhere in China looking at a factory for a project, and I saw these huge things, and they create the dies there in the factory, and then they push them through, and these things emerge from there, these long extruded shapes, these extrusions that are designed by engineers to make sure that the facade is waterproof, it's heat proof and things like that. So it's very precise, but that's not it. from the extrusions are brought to assembly factories where it's put together with glass. And that glass is then brought to the project where it's installed. So you can imagine these factories are not all in the same place. In order to create aluminium, you know, there is a lot of these little sesame seeds on screen. They are actually representing the ships around the world as the transports are made. It's a visual just to illustrate that a lot has gone into the transportation, and as a result, carbon to produce aluminium, which we use all over our buildings. So, I mean, I feel like, okay, I mean, if we could use alternative materials where possible, but we should think about embodied energy when we design.
So something interesting to understand is the ecological footprint. So it's the amount of the environment necessary to produce the goods and services necessary to support a particular lifestyle. In the process of preparing this lecture, I found out this website, which is footprintcalculator.org. And it's really interesting to see because it allows you to understand how many planets do we need if everybody lives like you, right? I did the test and I've always considered myself a very sustainable guy. And it was pretty disappointing because I would need 2 planet Earths and half with my lifestyle. So I encourage you to do the same ecological footprint test and see what's yours and try to see how to improve your ecological footprint. There is also something to consider is the ecological deficit. It occurs when the ecological footprint of a population exceeds the biocapacity of the area available for that population. So just to put things in perspective, I double checked on the global footprint network, and you see, for example, the deficit in Philippines is the minus 0.7, which, to be honest, is not. There are countries with have a lot bigger deficit, as you will see. For example, China is minus 2.6. United States is minus 4.5, with an ecological footprint per person of 8.1. And then Singapore is the last example I will give. It's minus 5.8. Just these numbers have to be taken with a pinch of salt because, of course, for example, the biocapacity per person in Singapore is very little. It's 0.1, but it's because the amount, the area of land that Singapore has is very small because it's a small country. So in this list, for example, the countries which have worse figures are really tiny countries that don't have that much biocapacity per person. But however, if everyone in the world were to live like an average Singaporean, 4.1 planet Earths would be required, which is pretty mind-blowing, at least to me. So we need to change our behavior to a more sustainable way of building.
Thanks, Javi, says the Spaniard to the Singaporean co-lecturer. Yeah, it is true. It is sobering. But to be fair, we are on an island of 750 square kilometers thereabouts.
Yeah, true.
We've got no country. You got to lend us your forest. But okay. But I mean, okay. So this shows a picture of a project that is ongoing in Singapore, and it's a house that I'm designing, and the thing is, when we had the circuit breaker in Singapore, which is like the quarantine in other countries or the lockdowns, construction stopped. And when construction resumed, so the stop was not a pause. It was a complete stop. There was nothing going on for 3 months. And of course, the owners would go like, oh no, we have tenancy issues, and how do we resume? And I realized that in Singapore, construction depends on so many things. For example, the wall cladding, which I put in louvers, is from the timber is from Malaysia. The floor finish, we ordered Italian tiles. So those were, well, the tiles had to be shipped from Italy or by container. The cement plaster uses sand, but the sand is not fully from Singapore, it's from the region. The lift is from Schindler. It's a Schindler's lift, and it's from Germany. There are parts from Germany. Kitchen appliances from the US, from Europe. Ironmongery we used from like Kawajun, for example, is from Japan, and our source of labor is from all over. So we have very little Singapore builders or workers, and I realized that resilience is really about being able to withstand shocks. That's what resilience is, to withstand perturbations. And for us to be truly resilient, we need to think about where our materials come from, like the sand. The moment our borders start being closed, what are our alternatives? Can we continue building? How do we communicate with our workers? You can see right here we have a Chinese tiler. He's the expert at tiling in the toilets, and we have a site supervisor standing there from Bangladesh, and who does the waterproofing. If we have our waterproofing expert stuck in his homeland, can I take over and do waterproofing because I don't know how to? And I realized that in a context of just a simple residential project, and we're not even talking about an airport. We rely on so many sources of skills and materials from all over the world, and this is not the most resilient thing. And I see this parallel universe over in Spain, and this is a project that we're designing in Spain as well, in Cabo de Palos, south of Spain. So I didn't have to do much to this picture, because I realized as I spoke with Javier that everything is from Spain. The ironmongery is from Spain. The Spanish workers, the tiles are from Spain. In Singapore, we order Spanish tiles, right? So every single element is from Spain. So if there's a lockdown, with segregation measures in place, everything can still go on, maybe not at the quickest rate because of the limit of the number of people. So it is a little important thing to think about when we talk about building local. We do not have options. We used to have brick kilns in Singapore 30 years ago, not now. We used to have a granite quarry, but not now. But I think this is something to think about. If we can't build completely local, we can build regional. We can source materials from the neighbors, from Southeast Asia, for example. So, and that does impact the amount of carbon used for the material, at the same time create for a more resilient ecosystem of building.
Okay, so we will talk about integrating outdoor spaces with architecture. So what I'm going to say now is kind of evident, but I think it's important to highlight. So what are the benefits of living in an outdoor environment? So it does improve the air quality. It regulates the temperature. It's very important in cities with very polluted cities. So when you have greenery and outdoor within these cities, it's so much better. So it has a key role in managing impact of carbon emissions. Trees capture and filter carbon. I'll slide through pretty quickly on these images, but it's just to give you an idea. So green spaces and trees provide natural drainage. And well, the previous pictures were humbly taken by me. And this beautiful butterflies at Luther's home. So it's amazing that he has this kind of butterfly there. But it's so when you have greenery in your homes, in your patios, in your parks, you have animals and makes the space a lot nicer. So studies have shown that if you are living close to a large amount of green space, close to you, it has lower mental distress levels and higher levels of happiness, which is it's very important. So according to the UN, it's mind-blowing, but in 2/3 of global population will live in cities by 2050. This picture was taken in China by me, and you see how densely populated this is and how important it is to make sure people living in these kind of cities have access to green spaces. So bringing nature to architecture has a key role in the well-being of people living in these urban environments. We've had interventions in the past few years. This is one example for an urban scale intervention. It's in Singapore. It's really close to Marina Bay. And the main idea here was to have these continuous green roofs, so people would be able to meander through these platforms to relax, to chill out with the amazing sightlines of Marina Bay. So the main concept was this is a good sketch that it just explains the green roof that is continuous over the program of the building. So this is another example in Vietnam. It's a master plan in Hanoi, and as you can imagine, for the ones who have been in Vietnam, it's a very congested traffic area in the surroundings. So for us, it was really important to create a buffer, so and have a very quiet and a green core, which was connected by green corridors, which took us to a center point in this green core. This is an image from the green core, and for us was very important to manage the amount of cars and the amount of traffic that was going to be inside this park. So as you can see, the podiums of these bigger buildings are working as a buffer between the highway, which is right in the other side. So
yeah, this is a project in Barcelona. It's a refurbishment of a sports facility, and I think one of the existing attributes of the site was that even though it's beside the beach, it's a beautiful beachfront. The design of the complex was not opening up towards a natural environment. So there was a sort of opportunity that we wanted to capture by tweaking the spaces, and you have practice football pitches, pools, as well as cafes that are actually open to a promenade, which is on the left. And this is actually along the coast at Badalona, near Barcelona itself, right? Or was it within Barcelona? So this is another project that we integrated the spaces as an educational facility. Together with a natural valley. So you have the spaces that are actually built across and behind a conserved tree area. And we wanted to let naturalized drains and streams come through so that the experience of nature with the public spaces is seamless. So this illustrates that that project. We wanted to very lightly anchor the two buildings and then crossing over with plazas and walkways to engage with this environment. Okay, so I mean, we went from big scale to small scale. So this is a home of a friend that I tore down, and then this is the previous home. I mean, and in place of it, because the functional needs of the family changes, it is a terrace house somewhere in Bishan, and here we introduced the outdoor space in a very narrow terrace house situation in order to bring both light and ventilation. I think courtyards are very common in many architectural schemes, but some people only want the light and not the ventilation. But in this scheme, we wanted to make sure that that we can use fans whenever the weather is not crazy, and still allow air to be drawn in from the front and the back of the living room and dining area, and exhaust out of the courtyard. So I think I'm quite happy to say that because this is a friend's home, I managed to visit a few times, and and it is breezy at times. So by allowing the front and the back to be fully open, so it's a new build, and I think the careful use of materials as well is important, as I will explain more on the
Luther,
next slide.
Luther,
Yeah.
should we highlight also not only materials is important, the careful selection of these, but also, for example, the selection of the vegetation and trees that
Oh yes, yes.
while we design.
So this tree that you see here is the frangipani, right? Very common one that's used in resorts and homes. However, the frangipani has died. I'm very sad to say that. But I mean, in place of that, we have a new, more lush gully kind of treatment. So a few ferns and a central palm, and now it's thriving. So I just wanted to say the selection of species is really important. I mean, we're in Singapore. This courtyard is open to sun for maybe 2 hours a day from like 11 to 1 maybe, because it's just open to sky. So, and maybe there might be too much rain at a certain time because there was a rainy season and killed it. So yeah, I mean, selection of the species, something that's resilient for such conditions is important. So you can see on the left, it's just some pivot timber screens that can open to allow air to come in from the front, and then from the back you have the same kind of screens. So it kind of links the whole first story space together, so that you feel like you're outside. But what's also important is okay, here I feel a little hypocritical. I use aluminium. As I said, embodied energy. I mean, I had to think about myself, because okay, this material you see is actually a rain screen. You have a titanium zinc, which is a kind of metal which grows stronger over time. It has a patina like copper, right? It grows a patina. It grows dark over time. And then above this, below this is an air gap, and then the actual roof is there. So it's like a double layered facade. Which is very important because this is west facing. The occupants were telling me that before they always had the afternoon sun heat up the front of their house, which is the only face of the house. It's an intermediate terrace. So this 2-layer facade is an important facade system. You can see here halfway during construction, I was climbing out there, and you can see below is a standing seam roof, and above is this rain screen of zinc titanium sheets. So finally, it worked very well. So yeah, that's just a quick share of that house. And at the moment, I'm working on workers' dormitory. One of the most exciting projects to do now. It's stressing me out, but I think one of the things in workers' dormitory as well is the importance of prefabrication. And in the scheme of a quick sketch, I can't reveal most of the contents because it's confidential. But what we did was to have a courtyard, ventilated space, so that the dorm blocks are situated around it, and these blocks are made of modular construction. Steel fabrication units, so that they are made more precisely. They are brought on site with sanitary fittings and finishes mostly done up. And I think this reduces a lot of waste, improves quality, and construction site management is slightly easier if these are well established. So and I think there is an opportunity as well, because I'm also reviewing some housing in India. Also low-cost housing, and we are looking at dorm blocks or workers' blocks that are very crowded, like on the left. It's in a structural grid. How do we create more ventilation? I think what we do is we can, following the structural module, remove some rooms and create some communal spaces for the workers to be using, and also allow some ventilation and greenery into this reduced density. I think for dormitories now, it's all about density reduction. And I think using a prefab system, it allows you to add on more beds to available space on site or to higher stories, if we follow the structural module and the structural system allows. So I think it's important to explore prefab techniques for sustainability as well.
Okay, so now we will talk about going green with refurbishment. According to the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction, buildings are contributing almost half of the greenhouse pollution, which it's a lot, as you can see. So if you type right now on your computers Eco Home, what it pops out on your screen is this kind of house, this kind of building, which is a standalone building within nature, high-end building, which this might not be the most sustainable architecture actually. So it's important for us as architects to ask ourselves, what's a good example? Is it the one in the left-hand side, which is a building, standalone building, high-end techniques in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of nature? Or is it a house within a standard city, which is very walkable yeah, it's right in the middle of a street with so many other houses. So something very important to consider is the impact of location. So let's say we have this same super green building, this super green home in two different places, one in the middle of a mountain, in the middle of nowhere, and the other one in the middle of a walkable city. So the one in the family living in the one in the middle of the mountains, they will need to drive every single day to the school, to work. They will need to drive to buy their groceries. Well, actually, the school and work maybe now with the new norm, yeah, that might be a bit different. But usually they will need to drive a lot. And the one in the right-hand side, the family living in the city, they will be able to cycle, they will be able to walk to work, to university, they will buy their groceries on a bicycle. So the family living in the mountain might end up having double the ecological footprint as the one living in the city. So this is very important to consider. And another question that is key is to ask ourselves what was there before. So when there is nothing, it's called a greenfield site. So let's consider that we add a super eco home in this same greenfield site. So it's logical to say that the one in the left-hand side had zero emissions, and even though the new house has a very little impact, it does require it does require transportation, and it does have a negative impact in this area. So we believe that there is a great opportunity at the moment, and we believe that one of the solutions might be to refurbish existing buildings. Let's say we are refurbishing, and in the left-hand side there was an old inefficient building with the transport. There was a transportation required. When we mean transportation is drive to groceries, drive here, drive there, okay? But then if we do refurbish, this new sustainable home has a smaller impact, and this transportation would be the same, because at the end this is in the exact same location, and it has the embodied energy to refurbish and redo this home. But at the end, there is a positive impact. So the solution might be to refurbish the old existing inefficient homes instead of keeping building in new places. So as I mentioned before, it's very important to ask ourselves, where is it located and what does it replace? I will share a personal example. Like this is the place where I was raised and where I was born. It's in the southeast Spain. It's called Mar Menor, and it's a natural lagoon. And you see there is a long, it's a 20-kilometer sand strip in the right-hand side. So this is called La Manga. And this was La Manga in 1960s. And I mean, like my parents would tell me that they went here for their weekends and they would spend time just walking on the dunes. And as you can see, it was almost empty. These were the ones here in the lower part of the image were the first buildings built in this area. So this is La Manga in 2020, right now. And it was only 60 years. It took only 60 years to build this. And I personally feel very disappointed and sad when I see that we lost the opportunity to build something sustainable for this environment. Now, for example, Mar Menor is having a lot of problems and suffering because there is so much people in there. There's so many little boats, and it's as I mentioned, it's a natural lagoon. So whenever we have an opportunity, whenever someone is asking us for a new project in this area, is it really good for this place to build new plots of land, or is it better instead of refurbish the old existing and efficient buildings and efficient homes in order to improve this environment? So we had the opportunity to do a refurbishment right in this area. So this is the sand strip here in the left hand side. As you can see, that's the sand strip, and this is in the town right besides. So the client here wanted to refurbish their old house. It was very inefficient. Structure was in a very bad condition, and we thought that tearing down the interior for a full refurbishment could be a good solution, and it would improve the footprint of this building at the end. So we improved the thermal insulation. We thought that bringing natural ventilation, opening new voids on this building would be the best solution for this house. So, of course, changing for a better glazing, and it allows for better daylighting, and how this house works during summer, during winter. Before it was very cold very cold. We don't have crazy temperatures, but it can get cold. So in the house during the winter it was very cold, and in the summer, which can be very hot, is many times we reached 38, 39, 40 degrees. It was really hot, so we insulated the whole house. This is the Luther shirt before this image. So this is it's an on-site picture of the current status of the house.
Yep. So I think we're on to a number of refurbishment projects in Spain. This happens to be a conservation one, and it's in Vienna, and it's a city hall building in Vienna, and so it's a light touch refurbishment was done to this. And I think in a context of Singapore, I mean, I grew up here. This building is 450 years old, I think. Well, it was, I think, in the 1600s, and I can't conceive that kind of period growing up in Singapore, because I think the same time period it was all marshland here. But here, this building, the fact that it stands after centuries, it sort of says that buildings are built to last, can be built to last. Repair work can be done. So existing beautiful elements and spaces can be kept. And in this project, we proposed a new access to the roof with a public space to look at the neighboring vista, especially towards the mountains, and also reconfigured the office spaces, seminar rooms, and lecture halls, created new entrances from the street to highlight some of the existing conservation elements. So this is just a reminder that I think certain things need to be kept. I think in Singapore, we have aging population, aging buildings coming in soon, and what do we do with them? Not all of them has been gazetted as conservation, but many of them are not as glamorous as a city hall building, but they can be I guess, assessed for its condition and then given a new lease of life. Um, so I think that is something that we try to keep all the time whenever we work on projects and advise clients whenever we can. Um, so
And
yeah.
yes, to end up this presentation, hope it wasn't too long. We would like to ask ourselves, why are we architects designing just a few exclusive nodes? We believe that our role is to design resilient, sustainable solutions for everyone. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thanks
Thank
for
you. Thank you.
listening in.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Architect Luther and Architect Javier. Well, what you've talked about today is very timely, and I believe that with all the things that COVID-19 has brought us, it gives us more opportunity to come together, and architects are stepping up. As I've seen in with all the webinar series that we've had in the past few days, people are getting united, and it's just the beginning. Having shared goal and shared purpose. um, we can do the same for the climate crisis, not just with fighting the pandemic. So we thank you for sharing your time and your fresh ideas when it comes
Thanks,
to.
Jonathan. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
And we're at this point, we're opening the this webinar for question and answer. If you can spare more time with us by answering some of the questions from our participants. And guys, I see one here coming from Renz Irvin de la Torre. I think we have to go back to the previous slide. He has a question. Okay. All right. Well, we got a different question here, but it says sustainable design and resilience in architecture are both noble aspirations that will redound to the benefit of ecology and humanity. How can the principles and practices of sustainability and resilience be applied to many of our major cities' population centers that admittedly have been poorly planned and are thus non-resilient and unsustainable? Question coming from architect J.R. Mendoza from UAP Singapore chapter.
Jay, well, okay. Yeah, Javi, I'll try. Okay. Well,
Okay. Yes,
so
please.
I think uh, well, it is quite a difficult question. I think as architects, we can do things in like little ways, like droplets of water. It's not like. But I think your question has impacts on planning, on city planning, urban planning, and I think sustainability. There's also an economy of scale. There are things that can be done at, let's say, a precinct or a district level that finally a home or a single building or development plot plugs into. And I think it is multi-pronged. Architects and practitioners have to show the way on how to implement this, because sometimes planners and policymakers might be planning from a level which might not be seeing how architects and all of us do it on the ground, and the challenges we face. So I think it's about working multiple scale, multi participant collaborating to make this work, because I think at a city level it is compounded, it's multiplied, and it is very hard to, let's say, solve it from the end point as architects. So yeah, I don't think I've answered the question, but I would just share my opinion on how I think this issue has to be looked at.
Okay. Architect Javier, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's many times it's about little interventions, and it's not about like high-end solutions or super high-end technical solutions. It might be just the way we orient our buildings and the way we allow for light to filter through. So I think there are many things that we can learn from the past, and we shouldn't lose that focus. And I think architects have a very key important role in this.
Yeah, I think just to go back to what was Javier shared about selection of location earlier. I think density allows us to do things. It's a double-edged sword. I think we live in a very high-dense environment that can be highly unsustainable if the urban heat island effect, for example, everything is concrete and everything is dark gray and black and absorbs everything like a sponge, like the building that we did last for the house. But okay, that one was reflective. But if you have very dark buildings, basically in the tropics, it would soak up the heat and re-emanate the heat at night outwards and inwards. And but with density as well, we can reduce the transportation needs to go all over to get your groceries to do this, because in a dense city you have access. And if every region of the city is built like a local neighborhood and you have many locals, you reduce the need for transport. You have chances for district cooling, for example. You can have a central system in order to implement chilled air and water. You can have a scaled up sewage treatment, for example, because every individual home's not so efficient, for example. And even things like harnessing renewable energies can be used on building facades, on roofs, on if you get high enough, you get wind turbine. I mean, Singapore wind is still not they're not suitable, but then I think they're still trying, and I think technologies have been trying to surpass current limitations. But I think in Spain, the wind technology is way more available, right?
Yeah, we have plenty of wind, and if I'm not wrong, Spain is one of the main producers of windmills and energy in the world. I would say. I think it's second. It was first.
Yeah, in Singapore, I think solar is the most viable renewable at the moment, but still the efficiencies need to be worked on. So but I think looking at zero energy buildings now, I mean, as they become more possible, the challenge is to do zero energy refurbished buildings, I feel, because then you can give buildings a new lease of life and then operate so that it doesn't take away more than it gives. And I think that is the challenge, and we all should try to meet that and try our best to create such buildings.
I feel it's our responsibility, right? We are we are architects, and we are the ones who design how we want our, well, it might sound a little bit, but it's true. We are the ones who design how we want our kids and our grandkids to live, and we are the ones thinking about that environment.
Okay, and yeah, baby steps can be done, and we'll take it from there, right? So, okay, shall we move on to the next question? Okay, so there's just a question. I think this is pertaining to the picture that you've showed earlier on. He was asking if what specific material was used in the canopy, that transparent part at the Lemniscate project by
Yes, I know which one. Yeah. Well, okay, I see the haha. All right, so I well, that's a troubling question. Well, okay, so this is it is a design at a very conceptual stage. Yes, it looks like glass. I think it could be ETFE, but I would prefer for it to be flat. But we haven't gone down to DD. So I think, but that was designed to bring light, and I know glass can be very high performance needed in order not to create a heat thing, but it's very high. So at the moment, I see it as some form of glass with a subframe, but it's not at DD stage. So yeah, glass is the material.
Yeah, it's true. It doesn't look too thick on those images, but I think it would be.
With freak patterns, I think the idea was to give like a Voronoi pattern, because it's a computational school. So we had the Voronoi, it's like a mathematical pattern, and I think that would be using ceramic frit, which helps to reduce glare and reduce the percentage of UV into the glass. Well, good glass needs to be very sustainable. It needs to have good low E coating. It needs to be done with frick patterns and double glazed if possible. triple low E, So all these I know because of the airport job that I did. It was, we have to see the tarmac, but then you also want to prevent the eastern sun from coming in and heating up the terminal. So yeah, glass is expensive when done well for our climate. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for answering that. And another question, our President Mark, shall we flash the next question? Okay, so well, I think architect Javier has talked about refurbishing buildings, turning them into from an old building to something that is well ventilated. And the question is, do you have a process we can follow for refurbishment? And what are the parameters to determine if a building is worth refurbishing or demolishing? Thank you. From architect Mike Guerrero of UAP Makati Greenbelt chapter.
Mike, hi. So I think for refurbishment, for example, here in Spain, we have a lot of buildings which are not in good shape, and many times what the clients ask you for is just to go there and have a look on how the structure is, on whether many times they are asking whether these buildings worth to refurbish or not. So in our case, we usually go there, take some pictures. We also collaborate with structural engineers, so they'll go there as well and do their testings. And there, to be honest, most of the times we finally thought that it was worth to refurbish the existing building, and it's more about changing the glazing, improving that glazing, trying to bring natural light somehow. But I'm not sure if I could say like a fixed process. Each one of the buildings that we are facing, each one of the opportunities is a totally new opportunity. So maybe one is in a super aggressive environment, like the one in Cabo de Palos, close to La Manga, the one I shared previously. It's in a super aggressive environment, right besides the Mediterranean Sea. So many things need to be considered, and it's not the same as, for example, another one that we had in the city of Murcia, which was an old building but wasn't exposed to that type of environment. So the structure was in a better situation. It was doing much better, and it was more about changing the materials and we in that case we tried to bring some natural light. But yeah, I'm not sure if I wouldn't say there is, for us at least, there is a routine that we follow. What do you think, Luther? You think we do?
Well, so I think we have to do an assessment whenever the projects came on, like when the client came and we wanted to discuss about refurbishment. Then it's an assessment of the state of things, the life cycle of the building. Buildings are made to last. Well, let's say for a 99-year lease, they should last 99 years, right? But then usually there are many buildings now that are not lasting that much, depending on what material we're looking at. The structure should stand, but many of the materials, the roof especially, has to be changed. Maybe the roof beam can be kept. So a thorough assessment, and I wouldn't claim that we are able to do it ourselves. We'll usually get an engineer to look at the structure, because that's the first step. And then the structure is deemed to be, if it's made of timber, then we'll have to see if there's termites, if the timber is in a condition whether it's rotten, and if it's not, it can be. Sorry, my cat is making a noise. But if the timber buildings the structure has to be sound for another 50 years, let's say, because you're going to start putting new finishes on it. So a visual assessment on all the elements, I would say, structural, architectural, and finishes. Of course, new owners, if they take over, they want a new toilet bowl. They even though the toilet bowl is serviceable for 50 years, they want a new toilet bowl. It's like, a ritual. I want a new toilet. I don't care. But we say that, okay, it still can go for 30 years. Can you use the same thing? And usually they will replace it. So I think it's an issue of waste. And I think it's a good question about process. We are discussing this informally a lot, having these tapa sessions to discuss about the building, what is the current state, what needs to change. So that visual condition is important, as well as there are scientific ways to measure the penetration of water. There are many. They even use the medical equipment to get into parts of the building to check whether it's like an autopsy. It's not an autopsy. What do you call it? It's just to get in to scientifically assess the building state. Then I think that will give you the assessment of where the building is at, and then you will then have to make a decision as the owner and developer together to decide on what's the best way.
And also, very important in this type of project many times is the budget. I mean, many times you depend on the budget that the client has. So if they want to do a refurbishment, but they have a very, very little budget, for example, it might not be worth it. So at that point, even in the first stages of design, is good if we as architects are able to let them know, okay, it might not be worth it to do this because you will end up with a house that is not even more sustainable than the one before, because you will spend all your money, I don't know, like tearing down the house and just redoing the new layout, and then you will need to put like very low quality glazings or some stuff like that.
Okay, well, that's quite it's a lot of information, I'd say. Yeah. Can we move on to the next question? All right. So it says here from architect John Adam Dakigan of UAP Santa Mesa, sir, may we know the percentage of additional cost with regard to incorporating environment-friendly solutions?
Well, I think it's incredibly subjective. We don't have a ballpark. If I may draw attention to the house with the courtyard costs nothing because it's just empty space. But I think the quality it brings with daylight and ventilation is priceless, and it's an environmental one. So you don't pay for the courtyard. In fact, you pay less because you less slab, less roof. Okay, maybe more envelope. Well, okay, you're right, more envelope. But the thing is that double roof costs like 10% of the build cost of the project. So and that double roof was a functional one. It's as well as it's also done to make sure it looks great and stately as well. So, but I think in principle, 10%, 15%, but it depends on whether you're using passive or active kind of environmental measures. If you want to install things that require electricity to run, like blowers and fans, well, systems that you use very expensive glass to deal with the fact that you need a glassy facade with a view towards the west sun or the eastern sun. You have to make up for it by spending, let's say, 50% more on glass cost itself. So because you need 4 layers of glass with the air gap, with low E coating, blah blah blah. So then, but I think it's, if we just do like the air tap house in Singapore, right? It's just long overhangs and louvers and ventilation blocks. They cost almost nothing or the same as that. So I think it varies. I think we should choose more passive measures to bring down the cost, so that the business case for it becomes much more viable.
Yeah, I was gonna say exactly that. I think like it can depend, it can vary, but many situations is there is no increment on the cost. Like in Spain, well, I'm sure as architects we need to understand, and we need to know the environment conditions. So here, whenever you are designing a house, you know that you need long overhangs in the south facade, you need louvers in the other facade, you need many of these decisions don't cost extra money. It's just a matter of being very careful and implement these techniques and these knowledge in the right way. That is not, it doesn't cost no additional cost for our clients.
Yeah, but I think the most difficult thing is to compute the carbon cost, because it might be really cheap, but it might be super expensive in cupboards. So I think in Singapore we struggle with getting more daylight in but keeping the heat out. So money has to be spent to make up for that difference. So I think there are ways to do it, like longer overhangs and then still allowing for daylight in, yet not the heat. Making sure it ventilates and things like that. So yeah, that I think requires active design thinking to make sure that it's being implemented in the projects we design.
All right, well, let's jump to the next question. Do you have a formal process and documentation in conducting the life cycle cost of your projects? From architect Jasmine Remando of UAP Baguio.
No, we don't. And this gives us an idea. I mean, we think that after we start doing projects, we could, using the rule of thumbs that we have been doing, and perhaps putting that in a framework that we can follow ourselves even. And especially lessons learned from before statistics. And yes, I think we should usually. I've worked with consultants before when I was doing bigger projects, but for the small ones, no, we have not. But it's a great question. It's something that I think we should work towards.
We should, definitely. We should. Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess that question will lead to something, better to improve the process. Okay, next question. Okay, coming from architect Jay Paras, what is your primary consideration or considerations in specifying materials and systems in a refurbishment project? Do you promote material reuse and somehow retain a sense of history, especially for the occupants? Thank you.
I think for the selection of materials, as we were sharing in the presentation, many times it's about trying to find a local source, local material which can be implemented in that situation. So the carbon footprint at the end is not as high as if it was from the other half of the world, the other side of the world. And many times reusing the old material that is existing. For example, let's say there is a timber ceiling that the old house had, and it wasn't in great, it wasn't doing great, but it can be repaired, and many times it looks a lot better. We've tried in some projects to reuse the old materials. We had a old refurbished house 3 years ago, I think it was, and in this case, for example, refurbishing this ceiling was a little bit higher, but it felt, I think in your question mentioned also that it gives this sense of history. So if you would have had a false ceiling, standard false ceiling, it would not be the same as having the old timber beams and the old structure, which gives a sense of belonging and a sense of history in your environment. Of course, it depends on wherever you live and what are the conditions of those buildings.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think many elements are not easy to reuse, especially if they have to be stripped away. But however, we try also to reuse materials from the area. We are trying really hard to use some of the products from a wine factory, a wine packaging, and to use them as architectural finishes. I think when something goes to end of life and we bring it to be used as a new material in a project, it becomes, well, it's cradle to cradle, right? It's something, the waste becomes used again, it takes on a new lease of life, and that's what we try to do. Again, there are a lot of functional and technical restrictions that come in the way, the weight of the thing, the module sizes, the fireproofing. So yeah, we're always experimenting, sort of like our research part of our design process. But yeah, so reusing parts might not necessarily come from the previous house itself, because some of these might not be in total state of disrepair, it cannot be used again. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
I think sorry, just to finalize this question, which is fun. I think the I think something important for at least for us, for Luther and me in this case, many times we are super excited about reusing an old material that was in the building or that we've seen in a closed factory, and we have to listen to clients. So maybe clients just we have to listen to them and just try to I feel in our case we try to more or less tell them if that would be suitable or it would be better or not, but in some cases we as architects also are wrong and are trying to install a ceiling that is a real case. We were trying to install a ceiling with old pallets from the factory that Luther was mentioning. And for example, these pallets were super heavy, and it wasn't what the client was asking for. So yeah, this is something to consider as well.
Okay. Well, in other words, we have to work with the client.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, that makes sense. And another question. Shall we entertain another question? Okay, from architect Kimberly Colayat, UAPGA, Batangas. Good afternoon, architect Javier and architect Luther. May I ask this is a clarificatory question. Is refurbishing somewhat similar to renovation, or is it a combination of renovation and restoration? Thank you and God bless.
Wow, I think I don't know. Well, I think yeah. Sorry, Javi.
I think these are very
rest.
different. These are very different. I'm not. I mean, if you go on Wikipedia, there are the terms are totally different. But for example, in many places which need to be renovated or restored, you say, the restraints are a lot higher than it just is in standard refurbishment. So I would imagine that I would say that is a matter of the allowance that you have to do your intervention. I'm not sure if Luther, what do you think?
I think there's a certain aspect of restoration and refurbishment. You're sort of bringing back into its original state. That's what you do in conservation work, right? Whereas renovation might be perhaps including, tearing out completely and building new things. It's a combination
You're
of both.
right.
So I think you might have answered that question in your question. I think at the back it sounds to me what's right, but I don't claim to be. Phil's joined us. Do you know? Well, Phil's our other co-founder. He's actually on here. Phil, do you want to share a little bit on that? maybe not caught him by surprise. Okay, yeah. So I think I don't profess to have the official definitions.
Yeah. Let's Google it.
Okay, do we have Phil in the group?
Phil's our co-founder who's based in London.
He's with his
he might be
newborn baby. Maybe he's just baby's just crying.
He's just having a earphone and the thing listening in, but not available to talk.
Okay, well, we'll try to get back to him later. But okay, so we got another question here from architect Rogelio Santos Jr. from UAP Baraswain chapter. Any of you can impart your side. So what is your stand of promoting green architecture by using some trending technology materials and system, but content of such is not purely natural or synthetic maybe, or even environment friendly?
Wow.
What do you think about that?
No, I think it's not right to do that. I think it's like greenwashing, right? And I mean, you to know that something is already not environmentally sustainable and then using it and saying that it's green, I think that's really bad because you're educating wrongly. But of course, it's very hard to avoid using things that are not completely green as well because of availability, because of supply, and maybe client preference. But you can always try to enlighten and get them on board with you from the start on your sustainability goals. But yeah, I think we should all avoid this like the plague. We can't
Hmm.
we should not fly the flag pretentiously.
Agree.
Okay. And all right. Well, I guess that will be our last question for this session, Architect or President Mark, right? Okay. All right. Well, this series has been very interactive. We've been getting a lot of questions, and I guess that only shows that the our architects here in Filipino architects are very much interested about the idea, of refurbishment and what you've talked about today. And it's very good to know that they're open to um, learning new ideas. So thank you very much, Architect Luther and Architect Javier,
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
for letting us see a different perspective in terms of this whole pandemic thing. And with that, we'd like to present our virtual certificate of appreciation to both of you. And at this point, I shall read what is written on the certificate. So it says, United Architects of the Philippines, Union ng mga Arkitekto ng Pilipinas, Singapore Chapter. Certificate of Appreciation is hereby presented to our first speaker, Architect Luther Seat, co-founder Inuli Singapore, for imparting his valuable insights and inspirations as the webinar speaker during the 15th UAP Singapore seminar with the theme Green Architecture, the Impact on the Living Environment, Rethinking Sustainable Design, Creating Architecture of Resilience for Current Times. Given this 20th of September 2020, Singapore, signed Architect Mark Lester Alcantara Valignota, UAP, President, UAP Singapore Chapter, co-signed by Architect Luisito Domalaon, UAP District Director, UAP Regional B1. So please accept this virtual certificate of appreciation. And I believe our President Mark will be able to send like the physical certificate to you in the mail. So
Wow, thank you so much.
thank you
Appreciate it.
also. It's our pleasure. And also, of course, we'd like to present another certificate to Architect Javier. Um, okay, well, it should be the same verbiage on the certificate, but
I don't
can
get
we
my
can,
certificate.
can we flash the certificate for Architect Javier? Well, you will get yours, Architect.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and we'll try to send that to Spain. I hope it reaches you. But thank you for collaborating, both of you, for sharing your thoughts and your fresh ideas. So it's there. It's Architect Javier de
Thank you.
Santiago, co-founder in Lee Singapore. Well, it's written the same. So yeah, with all pleasure, please accept this virtual certificate of appreciation.
Thanks so much.
You're
Javier,
welcome.
you have to consider the embodied energy of this thing heading over to Spain.
Yeah. Might not be worth it to send.
Thanks,
Maybe a
guys.
PDF.
And
Thank you so much.
maybe before you guys go, if our participants would like to catch you, where can we find you? Do you have email address, Facebook page, LinkedIn? Yeah.
We have the
Yeah,
our
yeah.
website.
How shall we share it?
It's www.inuli.com.
I'll
And
type all our email addresses and websites in the comment chat to everyone, maybe.
and
So you can reach us.
and then under contacts you can reach us. Yeah, there are a couple of email addresses.
Okay, so guys, it's in our chat box. So if you want to reach out to them, have specific questions or things you want to raise, do reach them out at the email provided. So yeah, it's do their seat at inlead.com. And we're waiting for
Then
Architect Javier. Yeah, it's Javier de Santiago at inlead.com. Okay, so once
Yes,
again, thank you
yeah.
so very much, and
Thank
we hope
Thank
you.
to
you.
catch you later.
Bye bye.
All right. Take care. Take care. Have a good weekend.
You too. Stay safe. All right. And guys, just before we move on to our next topic, we just like to show some of the clips from the recently held charity program earlier this morning. We've been encouraging and inviting and advertising this charity program at Silver Lining in Smoky Mountain, of course, headed by District Director Architect Luis Dumalaon. So, Press Mark, take it away. Okay, so guys, as you can see on the screen, some of the architects have come together again for a great cause. So this is, I believe, an annual or a regular activity that they do for the benefit of the children in Smoky Mountain. So they give bath, food, and of course, clothes to these poor children. And yeah, we're hoping that next time we can join the cause, and that's one of the projects and proceeds of this webinar series go to that program. So yeah. And of course, we also have new partners for that program, and special thanks to Puso Filipinas and Hisamitsu for providing sponsorship. So thank you very much. Okay. And at this point, we shall move on to our next topic. So Architect Javier and Architect Luther, you're feel free to join us, and if you want to listen to our next speakers. So okay, so here we go.
Sure.
Okay, so now I am ready to present and introduce to you our next speaker, who is a senior lecturer at the University of Melbourne. She's an architect, urban planner, and transport planner by training. She teaches undergraduate and postgraduate subjects, including placemaking studio, urban design for people and places, and placemaking for the built environment. Her research is concerned with improving our understanding of how people interact with place, creating unique challenges, but also opportunities for positive place-based change. She has also advanced a significant body of knowledge in streets as places, active transport, gender and transport, with theory and policy implications within the Australasian setting. Friends, let's say hi and hello to this woman of substance and class, a catalyst of change. Please welcome Dr. Iderlina Mateo-Babiano.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for that wonderful introduction. So I will be sharing my screen. Okay. Advanced sharing. Oh. Share this. So could you see my screen now?
Yes, yes, doctor.
Okay, yeah. So before I start my presentation today, I'd like to thank UAP Singapore for this invitation. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Also, and before I start my presentation, I would like to acknowledge that the country on which I am currently zooming, so the city of Melbourne, where I am at the moment, is located on the traditional land of the Kulin Nation. For the Wurundjeri Bunurong, Melbourne has always been an important meeting place for events, social and education, sporting, as well as cultural significant events. So I acknowledge that I am on the lands of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people who have been custodians of this land for thousands of years, and acknowledge and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Okay, so today what I would like to do is to introduce placemaking fundamentals. So this is the first in a series of placemaking modules that collectively aim to build placemaking capacity. So it aims to expand one's knowledge and skills in placemaking and the application of this knowledge and skills in practice. So as Place Agency Consortium came up with 12 modules. I'll be explaining about it later on, but this is a Meyer-funded project that ran from 2017 up to the present. So the Place Agency Consortium, which is an award-winning multi-university collaboration across Australia, created this 12-module series delivered in 10 weeks in close partnership with industry practitioners, mainly in Australia. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a project from September 2017 to 2019 and well supported by the Meyer Foundation. And the aim was to test studio curriculum, develop and test studio curriculum on training passionate and effective future placemakers. So there are initially five universities involved, and at present there are now 7 universities, which include Curtin University, Notre Dame University, University of Technology, Sydney, University of New South Wales, University of Queensland, the University of Adelaide, and of course, this is led by the University of Melbourne. So more information, if you want to know more about the project as well as the modules, you can access them for free from the website www.placeagency.org.au. But please feel free to contact me if you would like to know more about this project or know how to access the free materials, or if there is interest in delivering this course, please feel free to contact me after this presentation. Okay. So the aim for today's presentation are fourfold. So first is to understand the fundamentals of place value, and placemaking. Then I would like to conceptualize placemaking not only as a design thinking tool, but as a potential thinking tool. So instead of looking at challenges, we are looking at it as a potential of place and using it as a tool and instrument to do that. So the third one is understand various placemaking approaches. And then, of course, with any kind of tool, there would be some challenges as well as benefits of placemaking, wherein I also introduced the concept of biophilic cities, or what's the role of nature in place and placemaking. Yeah, so before I start, I would like to invite everyone to answer this 3 short questions. So I'll click this and it would bring me to this slide. So I'll activate it. So if you could please just text or answer this. So this is the link, paulev.com/DERLIE. I'll give you probably a minute to answer that. Are you able to access it? If you could show me a thumbs up. If you could activate. Could you answer it?
I don't think it's hyperlinked, Doctor.
No. So you don't click. So just input paulev.com. Okay. What I can do is actually type it in the chat box, I guess. That's the easiest way I could do it. Yeah. So paulev.com/DERLIE. Does that work? Or I could just do this, right? I think that's easiest. So this, if the first one doesn't work, so please click on the second one. So does that work now?
I don't think oh, there. Okay, yeah. It's sent by UAP Singapore, Doctor. Yeah, and we should be able to click the link. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. So I'll give you a minute to answer that question. It says the page you're trying to reach isn't here. Oh.
Yes, that's what we're getting.
So activate. I'll just technical issue, right? Okay. Yeah, sorry. I have to activate it from this. I think activate. No. Activate. Yeah. So that should work now. So does that work?
No, I think you're sending it to a private, to a specific recipient. Can you send it to everyone?
Okay.
I think
Everyone.
There.
So what do you see on screen? Yeah. So I've sent it in the chat box already. So there's a link.
Okay, we got that.
So if you, yeah, does that work?
Activity unavailable.
No, it's
Contact
not
the activity
allowing.
owner to request access.
Oh, okay. So I'm not sure why it's not working, but it's supposed to work. Anyway, I'll try one more time. Another way I could do this. Okay, so I'll just try it again one more time. But if it doesn't work, then I'll just move on to my next presentation. Next slide. Okay, how people can respond. So how about this time? Does that work? No. Presenter session. Yeah. It's probably not working. So let's just move on to the next part. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. So as you know, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it would be fixed, but anyway, the questions, the three questions were, first is, what's your favorite place in the world? And then second is, why is it your favorite place? And then the third one is, how do you define placemaking? So those were the three questions that I wanted to get a sense of, your understanding of those concepts. But in your mind, if you could just answer those questions, and if you're brave enough, maybe you could also input your answer into the chat box. That would be great. Then we could probably read it later on. So what is your favorite? So I'm just typing in the question into that in the world, and why is this your favorite place? And in your own words, define placemaking. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so those are the questions. If you're brave enough, please feel free to answer those questions. Okay, so as you know, great public spaces are an essential part of our urban experience. When for example, myself, when I first visit a city, I usually go on walks, sometimes aimlessly, just to experience the human scale interaction of the place. I also like to be surprised by the different sounds and smellscape that I experience. Like when for the first time I got off the train in Springvale. So Springvale is one of the more multicultural spaces, suburbs here in Melbourne. So when you get off the train, you could actually smell sauteed garlic, from the different Asian stores that are around the area. So, or the soundscapes of chirping birds in one of Melbourne's parks. So I also remember cities because of the stories around the public spaces. So indeed, public space have an important role in binding the various elements in the city together. So public spaces are valuable assets, and it helps make city vibrant, democratic, inclusive, and sustainable. So as city residents, visitors, and workers, we deeply value our public spaces for several reasons. One reason is for its use value, right? So, or the benefits that we get of using public space. And another reason is for its ecosystem services. So these are the accrued benefits of having lush green spaces and trees in cities that was mentioned in the earlier presentation. But some cities actually lack public spaces, and this gave rise to the privatization of our public realm. So people began flocking to semi-public spaces or quasi-public spaces such as shopping malls. This is very common, and shopping malls are very popular in the Philippines, where the affordances for the creation of social life happens in a false and protected environment. This has been highly criticized because it only caters for a specific group of people, a specific class. So if, for example, you're able to buy a cup of coffee, then you can go, visit Starbucks in the shopping malls. Otherwise, you are excluded from those spaces. So this is what Michael Sorkin, he's that person in the photo, pronounced that our cities are becoming theme parks. We see the proliferation of non-places as a result of urban sprawl. He also commented on how our urbanity is consciously and programmatically recreating empty urban forms that lack the formal and social mix that make our cities vibrant and political in the past. Sorkin once said, "There are no demonstrations in Disneyland," gloomily affirming the continuous degradation of our public spaces, both at the macro scale, where we see the proliferation of freeways and highways, and at the micro scale, the continued neglect of our laneways and streets, resulting in decay and decline of our public realm. So to be able to understand how we can address the challenge of our public space, we need to understand the concept of place. So I find that as we become increasingly globalized and connected, we sometimes forget and devalue those that are most important to us, the meaning that we associate with place, such as our culture and identity, our tradition and history, and we forget our deep ties to our local environment as well as our local setting. So I love this TEDx talk by David Engwish. So the person is not clear here. He's David Engwitt, who is a well-known placemaker based here in Australia, but well-known globally. He tells us about the story of his granddaughter, Nikita, who's on the picture. She was at that time 2 years old. At that time, she cuts her finger. She was whinging and whining to her mom and crying because it was really hurt. She was really hurt. She wanted to go home, and her mom was telling her that, you are home, because they were actually, in their residence, in their house. And her mom was explaining to her that she was home. And David explains that for a 2-year-old, home is not a place. It is actually a feeling. So he says that it is a feeling of no pain. It is a feeling of being nurtured, of being able to flourish into one's fullest potential. So it gives people a feeling of rootedness and connectedness. So that's how we find or feel we are in place, not out of place. So to better understand place, the metaphor that would best describe it is through the difference between a house, which is the walls. We are all architects. We build structures, and we build structures with walls, ceilings, floors, and that's the structure. But the home is where relationships are built. It's a place of comfort, a feeling of nurturing, a place that you can be who you want to be, a place where you feel that you are loved. So in the literature, the concept of place is often understood as the intersection between the individual and the space, which is the yellow bit in that diagram, which is the intersection between space and people. And it's understood as an emotional connection forged between the people and the space or place attachment. However, place agency, the consortium, is proposing and arguing another definition of place. So an important point of placemaking is to recognize that we are but one of the residents in our home called Earth. We live in an ecosystem where we are but a part of. And we now learn that our home is not exclusive for people who live in it, but indeed it is also important to our non-human neighbors. Most often our ecological system is typically ignored when we are designing and planning, yet they are very much a vital element for our well-being. Hence, one of the key principles of place agency's conceptualization of place is that livability emerges from the intersection between people, place, and ecology, people, space, and ecology. So, of course, plants and animals experience place as well as us. So, as such, we used Trudeau's definition of place as a starting point in this conversation in sharing a common language of place and placemaking. So we define place as a constellation of meanings and appropriate behaviors that define an experience in a social setting, which goes beyond its physical dimension. So, as architects, we usually focus on the structure, but we are arguing that if a place goes beyond its physical dimension, how should we then value? What is the place value, right? So what is the value of place? So Carmona, Matthew Carmona, who's a professor in the UK, said that value is most generically defined as a measure of the worth of something. So the term can be anything, but also it could be everything, right? So amongst all these disciplines, I think the concept of value is most commonly connected with economics, so the economics discipline. Yet the economic value of place is but one way of measuring place value. So in doing so, it is helpful to understand people's preferences and how they make decisions going into one place, into one public space, and on how they value certain things, certain activities within place. So according to Carmona, again, the diverse forms of value is generated because of how places are shaped. So the way we design our buildings, the way that we design our public spaces would elicit some form of value to the individuals who use it, right? So in the subsequent slide, we will be hearing from Matthew Carmona on how he defines place value. So hopefully this works. Could you please give me a thumbs up, Jonathan, if you could hear it?
I think there's no audio, but it's playing.
Oh no. So I think I should, sorry, another technical issue. I need to take out my stem so that you'll be able to hear. How about now? Can you hear it?
I think it's paused.
My name is Matthew Carmona.
There.
Professor at the Bartlett School of Planning, UCL, and chair of the Place Alliance, an organisation which campaigns for place equality in England.
And I think we need to increase the volume.
Sorry, what was it?
I think we need to increase the volume. It's too low. Okay.
I think when I shared it, I should have clicked something right at the
To
bottom.
introduce the idea of place value.
Okay, so I because it's a very long video, what I'll do
Now,
is
half the world's population.
I'll actually move this forward. Actually, don't know how to. Oh. So I'm just trying to play it, but I'm not sure why it's not playing again. Maybe I need to move back and then move forward. Is that how you do it? Oh, it's playing the whole thing. I'm not sure why it's playing the whole thing.
Hello, my name's Matthew Carmona.
Okay.
I'm a professor at the Bartlett School of Planning, UCL, and chair of the Place Alliance, an organisation which campaigns for place equality in England. In this talk, I'm going to introduce the idea of...
Oh, anyway, I think I need to stop this again. So basically what he's saying is that
of place value.
Place value, because it's a very long one. It's actually about 15 minutes, so it's very long. So I just wanted to get a snippet, a 1 minute snippet in the middle, wherein he defines place value and what are the dimensions of place value. However, I'll be explaining more about place value in a moment as well. So I'll just skip the this slide, and then I'll probably just add the link to this video so that whoever is interested in learning more about place value would be able to do so just by accessing the video. Sorry about that. Okay. Oh, it's now screen. Okay. So, okay. Yeah, so exchange, so what we're talking about place value, right? So what I was mentioning earlier is what's place value. So there are different dimensions in how we define place value. So there is exchange value. So exchange value is part of the built environment that can be traded. When we pay for coffee in a cafe, we also consider the value of being able to sit and have a table or spot while drinking coffee. So it's not just the transaction that's happening, but you're also actually paying for the ambiance and for having that spot in, a table within that cafe. So at the same time, there's also use value. So the built environment impacts on the activities that go on there. So a good example is the presence of hostile architecture that restricts rough sleepers. So for example, homeless, right? So sometimes we design our public spaces, the street furniture, the benches that would limit rough sleeping or people from lying down on certain furniture in the city. So I just provided this example in an airport. we usually see these benches in the airport, right? And if we have a midnight a midnight flight, or you have to stay overnight in the airport, so there are benches that look like this, wherein you couldn't actually lie down, right? So this is what we call hostile architecture, because through design or by design, we are discouraging certain behaviors from those who are using it, right? So anyway, there's also the image value, wherein the identity is that, yeah. So the image value, wherein the identity and meaning of built environment projects good or bad, such as Las Vegas, right? So there's also social value. So these are the built environment which supports or undermines social relations, such as this green space just beside the sea. Of course, it encourages social interactions, right? So there is also the cultural value. The built environment has cultural significance, so such as the Machu Picchu in Lima, Peru, right? Okay, so now what I wanted to you to look at is, this is an activity that I usually do in my subjects, wherein when I start a class, when we introduce our project site to our students, I ask them, once we've done this project site analysis, I ask them, okay, what is the value of that particular place, right? So from your own perception of the information that you have already gathered, what do you think is the value of this place to you? So I would give them these number of values: accessibility, aligned with nature, collaborative, comfort, distinctiveness, being of service, calm, diversity, history, storytelling, sustainable, etc. And I would ask them, okay, pick 3 you think are most relevant for your site, and pick 3 that resonate most with you personally, right? So those are information that I think are very useful, because they would guide the students on how they would address the challenges of the project site, right? This is usually where you would prioritize, for instance, history, so the cultural significance of place over the environmental benefits, right? So the stewardship, for instance. So, and from this place value cards, it gives the group or the class the opportunity to negotiate specific values that they associate with place with their other teammates, and it's very useful. So what I would like you to do now is to think about these different concepts and think about your favorite place. So for instance, let's assume that you've already done what I have asked you to do earlier, which was to think about your favorite place. And with that favorite place, what would be the value that you associate with it, right? So with these 2, 4, 5, 20 place values, which 3 of these what resonates with you personally, and 3 of these that are most relevant for your favorite place. Sorry, yeah, was that clear? Yeah. Okay, so I'll give you a minute. Okay. Could you kindly share the slide at a larger view? Oh, so what do you actually see in the slide? I actually couldn't see. I couldn't make it bigger. Maybe I'll escape, right? So could you see it, or it's too small?
It's kind of small, but it's readable.
Oh, okay. So do you see just the screen, or do you see the presenter's view?
I think we see more than the presentation, because we see the subtitles that as you speak, the words are written on down
Um,
below, so I'm not sure.
oh, okay. I'm not sure as well how to take that out.
Press mark, can you help? You're up.
How about this time around? Okay, so I think I think this button is actually for that. So can you see now? The is it bigger on your screen? Okay, yeah. Okay, that's good. So if you could share your answers in the chat box, that would be great. If you feel like it, right? So I'm not pressuring you. So press mark. I think you're saying something that I couldn't understand. Didn't understand it.
Sorry, I'm just talking to myself.
Okay. No problem. Okay. So for me, I think what I value most about a place is the storytelling. So the story that I learn from a place, because it actually sticks with me, and it gives me value when I find out what the place is all about, how it evolved, and what are the stories of the streets, of the alleys. It's really very interesting for me. Okay.
Okay, I just answer. For me, it's I'm aligned with nature because I always want, when I go somewhere, I like greenery, the nature, like Japan. So I love Japan. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Japan as well. That's good. Yeah, so we see here relevant for my favorite, aligned with nature, history, sustainable, right? Aligned with nature. That's really good. Excellent. I mean, Singapore is a city within a garden, right? So that's the vision of Singapore. It's not a garden city, but it's actually a city within a garden. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for those who contributed. So let's move on. So how do we support places, right? So in this instance, how can we support our public spaces if those are the values that we associate with public spaces, right? So placemaking is a way of shaping the places that we love to ensure that we give them meaning. So the main reason is to allow us to connect people to place through shared meaning and a sense of purpose. A public space is loved because we associate value to the place or its place value. That's why it's really important that we know what's the value of that place, not just by our own value, but the value of those people, around us, of those people who would you be using it, of the different stakeholders in place. Okay, so now what is placemaking? So I have this 2-minute video that simply defines placemaking and was drawn from how it was described in Carlsbad, California. So Carlsbad is a coastal city in the North Country region of San Diego in California, United States. So Carlsbad is a popular tourist destination. And so what is important to note here is how it places important on the process, the community, and the people. And I think it, encapsulates what placemaking is all about. Okay, so hopefully this works.
Carlsbad's always been known as a friendly community, a place where people greet strangers with a smile and share a sense of pride in the beautiful place we call home. As we continue to grow and change, we need to make sure we don't lose this sense of community, the small town feel and beach community character that makes Carlsbad special. In planning for a new city hall, city leaders wanted to create a public space that draws people together, a place where celebrations are held, friends run into each other, and people of different ages and cultures mix. A new civic center will act like the front porch of the community, where people interact with each other and their local government. This approach to planning public spaces is called placemaking. Placemaking is a way to design public spaces that act like a magnet to bring people together. When designing public spaces, the community is the expert. Uncovering and incorporating their ideas and talents is essential to creating a successful and vital community place. When placemaking has been successful, people use the words safe, fun, charming, and welcoming. These words describe the intangible qualities that make some place special. One of the most important parts of vibrant public spaces is the activities that happen there. Things that people can do together, like listen to music, play sports, watch children play, shop, eat, go to meetings, and collaborate on projects. In other words, great places attract people, and people interacting with one another build stronger, healthier communities. By reminding us of the values we all share, a new civic center will help make sure Carlsbad stays Carlsbad, not just for us, but for all the generations to come.
Okay. So again, I would like to reinforce that placemaking is a potential thinking tool. So if place is about meaning, then placemaking is a process to increase the capacity and capability of the people to invest a place with meaning, right? So how do we shape cities that would create or encourage meaning making? We make and create meanings through the relationships that we develop, nurture, and sustain through time, as I've mentioned earlier. So we, Place Agency, introduced this this place diagram. It has 4 dimensions. So this describes, demonstrates what is important with a place and how to evaluate successful places. So the place diagram demonstrates the purpose of placemaking is developing emotional connection between people and place. And connections are manifested in different ways. So in the 4 dimensions of place, so in the 4 dimensions of place, connections can be developed through the built environment, natural environment, and people that interact and represent the individual and the community. Yeah. So the red lines are the relationship that could be built between and amongst those different dimensions. So the key intention of placemaking is to support these relationships between the different dimensions. When done effectively, these relationships will result in emotional and behavioral outcomes, including better ecological health outcomes when we enhance the relationship between nature and place, nature and public space. So we have stronger ecological health, stronger sense of belonging when we strengthen the relationship between self and community. So that those 2 bits, self and community. So sense of belonging and conviviality. Place attachment or sense of place when we work towards the relationship between place and community. This 2. So place and of course biophilia when we improve the relationship between self and the natural environment, as well as the community and community and the natural environment. And in doing so, we actually start that discussion, conversation, or the belief in stronger connection to nature that would subsequently lead to custodianship or stewardship. And this is really important if we would like to encourage relationships, strengthen the relationships, and come up with longer term outcomes as the basis for evaluating successful places. Yeah. Okay, so when we were thinking about placemaking, we came up with this 5P model on how we define placemaking. So there are different types of placemaking, and we can use different typologies of placemaking in different aspects of the project, right? So this is the 5P model. So we consider people, process, product, program, and place evaluation. So it's a bit complicated if you look at it. So, it's color coded as well. So when we are talking about people, these are the people that, so top down, community led, flexible, incremental. When we are talking about process, it's participatory ladder, project strategy, placemaking category. Don't worry, I'll be explaining to you in more detail in a few moments. The product would be the scale, temporality, and type of outcome. So the output. Program is the experience in place, and of course maintenance. Sometimes this is the bit that's lost or not considered. And then place evaluation is how do we then maintain and support relationships, longer term relationships, right? So first of all, it's important that we know why we are improving our places or our public spaces. Is it for the purpose of, is it for empowering? Is it a governance strategy that you're using placemaking? Is it an acupuncturing strategy wherein you want to catalyze change and you start with a small project, you test it, you pilot test it, for instance? Or is it a reclaiming strategy? What are we reclaiming from that public space? Is it an experiential strategy? Is it a storytelling strategy? Or is it building capacity, as what we do in the university when we teach placemaking, right? And of course, people. We start with the first P, and that's people, which stands for people. We consider people as active agents of public space in shaping and creating places. So it is important for us to always ask, who are the people? What role do they play in this project? Or what role can they play? So who are the stakeholders? Stakeholders can not only be the shareholders, but this can be the community who can be the champions, who could be the leading the change, or they could be the individuals who are voiceless, the individuals whose voice are important, that should be brought into the table, but we are unable to do so just because they don't have the monetary stake that they could bring into the table, right? But how can we ensure through placemaking that their voices are heard? And how can we work with them to support relationship building? What are their needs, aspirations, experiences, cultures, and relationships, right? So people. The next one is P, process. So when we talk about process, this refers to the exercise, to the placemaking exercise, where the key role of the placemaker is to create a good platform or environment for communication and empowerment, right? So the process should allow the community to lead. We'll use local knowledge, as you have seen from the short video clip earlier. The community is the expert, and how it can respond to local perspectives and have a clear focus. So placemaking process is therefore collaborative, dynamic, responsive to changing conditions, and develop strategies for placekeeping. It is also bottom-up. That's why community is the expert. So it employs ways on how we can mobilize people from the grassroots, from the community, to lead change. It is also purpose-driven because placemaking is undertaken for a specific purpose, as I have already started off before defining the 5P framework. And of course, the most obvious is the output, right? So the product. So the next piece, product. This is the output. I think the key point here is that output can be physical outcomes, as what we know that would be an outcome of any kind of, for example, design thinking activity. Is a production of space, hence refers to the tangible outcome of the project, the actual public space that's changed or improved or has been enhanced. And the public space could also be at different scales, right? It can be large scale intervention, medium scale neighborhood placemaking events, or it can be a street scale pop-up community event, which is at the micro neighborhood scale or individual, sometimes household scale, right? But more importantly, beyond the physical outcome is the relational outcome that placemaking brings. So this refers to the extent to which placemaking was able to enhance the social capital of the community by strengthening people's connections to and use of place. Hence, this takes on intangible forms. And this is really very important because when we improve public space, and it's a place that's commonly used and shared by different individuals who have different motivations of using place. So it is important that we engage them and we empower them and we place agency on them to ensure legacy, to ensure sustainability. And of course, the next piece, programming. When we are addressing a complex problem, we should consider a systems approach in placekeeping. So placekeeping, or the programming part of placekeeping, is actually the glue which holds emotional connection to place. Right, it's the different meaningful activities that are based on local needs, that are run through the whole year, for instance, or seasonal. For example, every July, specific festivals, for instance. So placekeeping strategies is needed for ongoing re-engagement to retain social, economic, and environmental benefits of place. And last but not the least, and the most important, I think, is place evaluation. So the purpose is, how do we learn from this project for the iterative process? So the project is not an end in itself, and but usually place evaluation is usually not considered, and it's a bit sad, right? So because through evaluation we are able to assess progress, we are able to identify moments to adapt, we are able to demonstrate benefits, we are able to help evolution, and of course legacy. So again, I'm showing to you the place agency 5P framework. So when we are conducting placemaking, we consider these different elements. So the 5P building blocks, as we call it, and then consider for each building blocks, these different elements within those building blocks. So who are the people? What role do they play? Are they the leaders? Are they leading the project, or how will they participate, basically? And the process, the product, the program, and place evaluation. That is really about supporting ongoing relationship of place. So here I will show you some examples of placemaking. I know I have about 5 minutes to finish off this presentation. So I'll provide some examples of different placemaking typologies. So one is creative placemaking. This is actually a art mural in Singapore when we visited 2 years ago. And we also presented to UAP Singapore. So this is creative placemaking, when partners from private, public, nonprofit, and community sectors strategically shape the physical and social character of a neighborhood through the use of arts and cultural activities. So that's what we call that creative placemaking. Strategic placemaking is the deliberate, often phased approach to change. So several suburbs cities here in Australia, particularly Melbourne, have placemaking strategies in place because they see the value and benefit of placemaking. So while placemaking in general is usually bottom up, this strategic placemaking is top down, but it's top down in its approach on how the community could lead. So it is a mechanism that enables community participation in placemaking. And of course, the most obvious, the most typical, I guess, the most known type of placemaking is tactical placemaking, which is combining tactical urbanism and lighter, quicker, cheaper approach. And mainly it's community-led, small-scale, and temporary activations of place. And the purpose of these could vary, but one of the key purpose is to test ideas and some of its benefits, and including understanding what elements of a project have most potential and which elements to scale up and which elements should be discontinued, or which elements could support long-term legacy of place. So another common type of placemaking is digital placemaking. This is now becoming trendy, particularly during special seasons, for example, Christmas. So digital placemaking can be used as a placemaking tool, either to breathe life into old structure, as what you can see from the photo, to tell a story about place, showcase Aboriginal art or history of place, as what this picture is all about, in new and exciting ways of connecting people to place through technology or digital platforms. And last that I would introduce to you, but obviously there are more types of placemaking, is regenerative placemaking, which recognizes the role of nature in placemaking. So as inspiration, either a form or a form of engaging people to connect them and enhance sociological relationships with place. Okay, so of course, as I've mentioned, there are challenges of placemaking. So sometimes it's very political and challenging, as based on the discussion with Professor Carolyn Weitzman. And she says that placemaking should be strategic and multidisciplinary. It should involve skills such as brokering and negotiating. It should be dynamic and synergistic. Sometimes they are subversive actions in order to change processes, to change place, right? So this is one way of place unmaking, as we call it. So it's place demolition. So a critique of placemaking is called place demolition, as Jamie Calvin calls this place unmaking. This is a process of replacing a place with what we perceive as a better version of it. In doing so, we run the risk of attacking the very identities of the inhabitants who live there. And in the process of change, we are excluding who called the place home. And it is clearly contradictory to the essence of placemaking. Another challenge of placemaking is place masking. So according to Ruth Fincher, a professor here at the University of Melbourne, this is displacing as a result of placemaking. When we design for future residents rather than the current residents, who is perceived to not fit the profile of those who should live there. So when we do that, urban areas sometimes prioritize economic development without an explicit consideration of the social and spatial equity of place, thus resulting in gentrification or gentrified neighborhoods. So it is really important when we are doing placemaking that we are aware and conscious of the decisions that we make. So benefits of placemaking. Placemaking offers multiple benefits. So it strengthens, one's feeling for place, such as having a strong sense of civic pride, social integration, sense of belonging, as well as reducing depression, in particularly here in Australia. It also elicits stronger sense of community and belonging, better quality of life and conditions, and improved educational outcomes. It could also be about increased visitation, which is good for local businesses in terms of increased revenue. This means that if we are managing place, because local businesses have already taken on the increased revenue, they took on the management of place as well as part of their business, of running their business. So in that sense, the council has now less than monetary input into improving or enhancing that public space. Of course, as I've mentioned at the start of this presentation, is the ecosystem services. So when we attach to place, ecosystem services is the different services that we gather from the natural environment. So this would lead into resilience, adaptability. So it improves our natural environment, improve waterways, reduce heat stress, reduce pollution, cleaner air, increase biodiversity. So I think the increasing biodiversity as well as encouraging ecological stewardship, or the willingness to support sustainable practice, is really important when we are looking at place long term, right? So this is Singapore, and I just wanted to reinforce the point of nature in place. So nature is the physical world collectively, and nature is fundamental to life and health and well-being, our health and well-being of humans, but also of non-humans, to maintain biodiversity and for everyone to thrive. So it helps us create and sustain place. Nature can be considered both as a passive element, but also as an active participant of place. So the green spaces are created within the urban fabric is one element of how the built environment could integrate the natural environment, right? So this is these are the ecosystem services that I've mentioned earlier. So it helps us regulate our natural environment. So the air quality, cooling, water quality, and quantity. So for instance, especially in Singapore, in the Philippines, for example, this is really a very important strategy that we can incorporate in our design, wherein we could create microclimate with the use of the natural environment. So microclimate is, creating a climatic condition that's comfortable and comfortable for people and animals and plants in a particular area, which is quite different, could be, cooler than the surrounding area. So urban ecosystem services is also from the natural environment, is through provisioning. We get food, water, and other materials from the natural environment. It's also supporting. So the habitat, it supports different types of habitats. So the biodiversity of our natural environment, right? And of course, cultural, the mental and physical health and well-being, social interaction, cohesion, recreation, and tourism, as well as sense of place. So these are just some examples of how we can integrate the natural environment in placemaking. So some examples of guerrilla of this is guerrilla gardening. So we particularly here in Melbourne is very common, wherein you see this patch of land or an idle land that hasn't been used and it's publicly owned land, and they would just plant corn or plant some veggies, or sometimes in front of our homes, on the sidewalks, you would see these types of sometimes a box, and then they would just be planting some either vegetables or flowers, or even these nooks wherein you have these metals and there would be hanging flowers on it. So these are ways wherein we could employ nature in placemaking. Another way is how we did it. So Placemaking Sandbox Studio is a studio that we run in the different schools here in Australia that uses placemaking as a concept as of their studio, right? So what we did is we engaged different groups. So children, for instance, in planting and replanting. And last year we had an activity. Of course, I didn't lead it. It was another colleague who led it. And so they brought in about 40,000 species of indigenous and endemic plants into the university. And it was, for 2 weeks, they had different activities happening within the University of Melbourne, which is how we can integrate, nature in place. And another common activity is parking day around September, well, actually this month, wherein we convert parking spots, street parking, into some other used for some other activities. It could be a pop-up cafe, it could be a playground, it could be a bowling, etc. So these are just some examples of how we can integrate nature in placemaking. And I think that's this is the last slide. This is my last slide. Sorry, I've extended. I think I've extended for 5 minutes. So in summary, in this fundamentals of place and placemaking session, we explored the benefits of placemaking, as well as discussed the values and challenges of place and placemaking. We also introduced different purposes and strategies in shaping places, including its limitations, and through 2 key concepts of the 5P placemaking framework and 4 dimensions of place, we introduced place and placemaking, our understanding of place and placemaking. And how we understand place is that it's not only a space, but it's a constellation of meanings and appropriate behaviors that define an experience in a social setting, which is drawn from Trudeau's definition of place. So place for us is about relationships built rather than only the location itself, right? So placemaking is a potential thinking tool to help in meaning making and relationship building. It is also a process to increase the capacity and capability of the people to invest a place with meaning. So meaning is usually defined by the value we associate with place. So nature integration is an important part of placemaking, given the value of our ecosystem and the services that the natural environment affords us. With that, thank you very much. And of course, this will not be working, so I will not do another poll. So just some plugs. So out of the activities that we did as part of Place Agency Consortium, so we came up with these 2 books. So the first one is Placemaking Fundamentals for the Built Environment, which was written by Dominic Hess, who was the earlier project director of Place Agency, and Cristina Hernandez Santin. And this is the basis for, so one of the chapters, for chapters 1 and 2, was the basis for this presentation. And out of the sandbox studios that we ran, I and a colleague, Dr. Kelum Palipane, also came up with an edited book, which showcases the different placemaking sandbox studios that we ran. Thank you. Any questions?
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Derley. And yeah, I believe Dr. Dominic was one of our guest speakers as well during the first part of the webinar series. And it was such an amazing presentation, Dr. Derley. And what you've talked about is a breath of fresh air. And I guess from a non-architect like me, I learned a lot. I just realized that placemaking is something that should not be taken for granted when planning, designing, and building a project. So yeah, for the past few days, we learned that in architecture, we talk about space and form. We talked about experience and meaning, and all of these qualities are inseparably the sensory experience of sight, touch, smell, and sound, maybe. And I guess just my 2 cents, listening to clients, listening to the community, listening to nature are the keys. And as he said, we need to listen with our hearts, because when we have a conversation with our clients, we should realize that they have needs, and both stated and unstated needs. So listening with our hearts is vital. So yeah, it's very fruitful and very informative presentation. So with that, would like to open the session for question and answer. And I believe we got, well, here comes the haha participant, the haha guy again. He got a question from Renz Irvin de la Torre. He says, oh, can we have the the first question posted in the chat. But okay, let's have the first one posted here. It says, may I ask for you, Doctor, what placemaking strategy can you incorporate for heritage places, such as in the Philippines, the Maestranza parking in Intramuros, as it was a public space before, but now it is only just a parking space. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think in terms of placemaking, we need to understand what is the purpose of placemaking, right? So as I've mentioned earlier, I'll no, I don't need to go back to my slides, right? So, yeah, so it's a potential thinking tool, and it's really great because you're talking about a parking space, parking building that's not being used as a parking spot this time around. I mean, I could think of so many ways on how we can convert such parking building into something that would be more valuable. So, for instance, there's been a lot of discussions here in Melbourne on how we can convert public parking spots into outdoor cafes, at the rooftop of parking buildings. We can convert it because what we're doing, because now, in the time of COVID, we actually don't have a vaccine yet. So we need to think about how we can utilize, public spaces or buildings that are underutilized in ways wherein we are still adhering to health protocols, but at the same time, ensuring that we are not undermining the social capital. So, it's ensuring that social networks still continue while physically distancing, right? And the best place that I could think of is, open parking buildings wherein there's air, there's no air conditioning. So, in terms of actually wherein the disease would not be able to spread more easily because we are in an open air area. So I think in terms of placemaking, going back to placemaking, we need to think about, so what is the aim of this placemaking exercise? Is it about engaging the community and knowing what they think would be the best use for that building? Or is it about thinking of ways through small pilot projects, see, the pulse of the community, right? So, I mean, there are different ways on how we can deliver a community as a placemaking activity, but the first thing is understanding what's the purpose of conducting a placemaking exercise. So for instance, let's say it's about engaging community on what they think would be best fit for that underutilized parking building, right? So community could mean the different retail shops in the surrounding area, because I'm not sure, what are the land uses around the area. Is it residential? Is it mixed use? Is it in a historic district like Intramuros? Because you mentioned the question was about a historic area, right? So what are the existing uses? So what are the, the potential use of those buildings if, for instance, now they're not being used? So once we understand that, and once we know who the stakeholders are, there are different ways of engaging with them. So one way that you could engage with them is to so what we do is through digital platforms, right? So asking them what are the different ways on how we can use space. So because it's difficult to actually have a community consultation at the moment. So what we do is we ask them through an online platform. So this is what the city of Melbourne would be using or would be doing, right? So for example, they're coming up with a strategy. They would usually ask people to, provide their ideas through a digital platform. Another way is coming up with, for example, you have some ideas. Could it be converted into an art gallery, or could it be converted into a restaurant or open air restaurant, for instance, or the lower part of the parking building could be a open air movie theater, so these are some ideas, and you try to test it and then see through different activities and get the feel of the people around, if which one they would want that place to become. Is it an art gallery, or an open air cinema, etc. So there are different ways of how we can engage community. And so I think the most important bit is understanding what's the purpose, and then identifying what are the activities to be able to engage community with that specific purpose.
Okay, well said. And I guess putting or taking into consideration the pandemic as well, of course. Yeah, so
Definitely.
I guess that's very important. Okay, so let's entertain another question from architect J.R. Mendoza from UAP Singapore chapter. Good placemaking makes use of underutilized space to enhance the human experience. This is all well and good when such spaces are available. How then can placemaking be applied to many urban settings, such as urban slums, where space is at a premium? But where are the benefits of good placemaking are perhaps needed much more?
Yeah, I think excellent question. Thank you, Jay. So yes, this is also an interesting perception, because I think there is a perception that there is limited public space within informal settlements. Of course, informal settlements are different from one another. But what was interesting was that a 2016 study that was conducted by UN Habitat, so United Nations Human Settlement something, right? So they've actually mapped different informal settlements and the proportion of public space within these settlements. And it's actually about 12 to 13%, which is not too far from the average, which is around 14% of the total land area. So these, of course, includes the informal public spaces that are used, not the formal public spaces within informal settlements, because probably we wouldn't be able to see, as much. However, when they've mapped the different informal spaces that are being used, like along laneways, small paths within informal settlements, cumulatively, they actually, quantity-wise, they comprise about 12 to 13% of the total informal settlements, right? So it means that they do have public space. But in terms of the question on the quality is another question, right? So how can we encourage or enhance the quality of public space? So there are, slum tourism is a concept that's quite contentious. So a lot of people see a benefit out of it, but a lot of people are saying that we are trying to glorify something that needs to be improved on, right? So placing that aside, I think this is one way wherein slum tourism is something that's successfully utilized or capitalized on the concept of placemaking as a way to encourage tourists to visit the area, right? So I forgot the place in, so obviously it's very common in Latin America, but in Indonesia, there is one, I don't exactly remember the name of the place, but the idea is they've used paint to improve and enhance the place. And through that process wherein they engage community in improving and enhancing their informal settlement, it actually increased the love of place, because through that process, individuals felt that there is an identity, there is a value to their place, and that value is what improved or enhanced or their love of place. And because they now see the benefit, not just economic benefit, but the identity of their place, they are now better placed in maintaining, that place and ensuring that it doesn't go into decay or deteriorate, but actually, maintain that place for a longer time period, because it has now a different set of values that's attributed to that place.
Good point. I think that's the Rainbow Village in Indonesia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And it serves its purpose, I guess. Okay, so shall we move on to another question? All right, from architect Jasmine Rimando, UAPS Baguio. Thank you, Dr. MATEO-BABIANO. This is a very interesting topic. Question, aside from public consultations, which are usually through meetings, what methods have you used to engage the community, grassroots, in becoming proactive stakeholders in the placemaking process?
Yes, so with my students, as I've mentioned earlier, there's a placemaking sandbox studio. So we usually run this every year. And we engage with local councils here in Melbourne, and different universities also do their own placemaking sandbox studio. So through the engagement with City of Greater Dandenong here in Melbourne, so the idea was that City of Greater Dandenong is the most multicultural place multicultural city in Australia. And so we have a huge population of Vietnamese, of African descent. So about 61% have at least one parent coming from overseas, right? So it's a very multicultural place. And so the idea was that how do we then improve or enhance the laneways in that place? And so the students had to look at 5 laneways. And we were, of course, engaging with council. So one way that the students did was to do a one-day pop-up intervention. So in those different laneways, so in 3 laneways, the students designed a way of engaging the community. So basically the community was people who were the individuals passing through that laneway. And so different groups came up with different ideas. Of course, they did observation, what were the issues and challenges of that laneways, and then came up with some interventions and tested it on that day. So 6 a.m. We went there. They did improve the implemented the intervention, then observed what happened after, the rest of the day, and then I think we ended up at around 4 p.m. in the afternoon. So in one laneway, what they did is they came up with a green wall. So the idea was that to give to pilot test some ideas. So the green wall, what do they think about implementing a green wall along that laneway? On the other hand, in another place where in an underutilized laneway, another group used it as a way of eliciting ideas from individuals. So what they did is they created because it was beside a restaurant, so they created a place where people can sit, right? But it wasn't the idea of that laneway wasn't creating places for people to sit down, but it was creating people to engage with them. And when they engage with them, they were then asked to provide some kind of ideas through kind of a game. So they were, they had boxes and asked people passing through to sit down, and then they would, ask, tell stories about the place, and then through those storytelling, they would then ask questions. What do you think of this, underutilized space? It hasn't been used for the past 5 years. What do you think should be here? So, it was more of an engagement strategy. So another group also in another laneway suggested this, but this wasn't approved by the council. So it was, we were engaging with the council, which ones we should implement and not. So this one wasn't implemented just because the stakeholder beside it didn't want us to use their wall. So the council saw, because they were engaging with the stakeholder and they didn't want to, so they're engaged, so they have a good relationship. They didn't want to change that relationship, right? So they decided we will not pursue it, but it was a good idea, I think. So the idea was through maps, people going through that laneway were asked to indicate which country they came from, and then putting some ideas of how the laneway should look like. And then it would go into a Twitter feed or Instagram feed, and it would also elicit both from on a digital platform as well as online. So I mean, there are different ways. And another way, again, when we were in Malaysia with Think City, is asking, so one of the walls that they so there was a laneway, at the end of it there was a wall, and the only sentence that was there was, this lorong, I would like this lorong to be. And so individuals would be passing through, and then they had the opportunity to write down what they thought this laneway could be. I mean, there are different ways of engaging community. And I think the way that placemaking engages community is beyond the traditional way of, surveys and interviews, but it's more of engaging through play, engaging through ways and means that it's not really, it's a way that you would be happy to engage with, rather than something that's, okay, I'm doing a 10-minute survey or a 15-minute survey, right? So yeah, so different ways. I hope I was able to answer the question.
Yeah, and maybe immersion, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, and let's move on to another question from UAP, Baraswain chapter. So hold on. In consideration of urban ecosystem, however, we architects are so devoted of promoting and applying it in our practice here in the Philippines. It would be practically difficult to succeed because of political hindrances, if I may say. What would you advise us in taking initial steps to bring this into realization with the support of our local and national governments? Thank you. Architect Rogelio G. Santos Jr. from UAP Baraswain chapter.
Thank you, Architect Santos. I think that's a really a very excellent question, because I once listened to an important urban designer presentation wherein he mentioned that urban design is design and it's the weakest amongst the forces, because he said that the strongest would be the financial as well as the political forces. If you don't know how to balance and engage with the two, then your design is for naught. So I thought that it was really a telling way of saying that, yes, you can design, but more importantly, you need to know how to engage with both political as well as the financial forces that are if not more important. So yes, definitely engaging with community, with local government. So in the book that I showed you earlier, Placemaking Fundamentals for the Built Environment, we actually, chapter 10 actually talks about, chapter 10 or chapter 9, how we engage with local government and industry, so private sector, right? So I think it is really about advocating. It is really about having a collective voice and understanding how placemaking, through placemaking, you could increase and improve and enhance the natural environment, right? So, through testing ideas. So for example, what's happening now in the Philippines is, the pop-up bicycle lanes, right? So this is one form of placemaking wherein there is an idea, and of course it's called for with the current condition and situation. And so let's try and test it, right? So through testing, we realized that actually we need it. And because we've tested it and we saw that there's a need, then we are now moving into the actual implementation of it. So I mean, it is really a process of initially engaging with local government, and it's not a one-off engagement. It's about building trust, and it's about two-way conversation of what benefits can we get from it, not just tangible, but intangible benefits. So for instance, when I'm running my placemaking studio, I actually engage with the local council, have been engaging for the past 3 years. So it's really about trust building. It's really about advocacy that's continuous. And it's really about having a collective voice to implement that action, right? So it's difficult to actually answer it, in a more specific way. But I think, so I think it's more of finding the champion. So if you are able to find a champion in local government that believes in you, then I think you're good to go. Or if you have a benefactor who's really keen on increasing, biodiversity, for instance. So for example, Meyer Foundation, the funder of this project, understands that public space is important and placemaking is an important strategy. And so they have provided, $800,000 to actually run this 2-year program with 25 members in the consortium, right? So in a way, if we are able to find that particular change champion or a community that champions the idea, you can start from there. So for example, in Melbourne, there are a lot of active citizens, I guess, where they promote placemaking. That's why then the government saw the benefit of placemaking. So for example, converting underutilized lots that have been abandoned, and they asked local council, okay, could we convert this into a vegetable garden while it's not being used by the owner? And the council say, okay, let's use it. And then they realize that actually by doing that, the abandoned space now becomes an asset for the community. And so it now became a strategy for the, not just for the community, but that has been adopted by the council per se. So that's the idea of the placemaking strategy that sits within the council. So while it's a top-down, because I think there's another question, so I'm just trying to answer that question, wherein that's a top-down approach, wherein they have a policy that encourages placemaking within that council, right? But at the same time, it's a strategy that encourages bottom-up placemaking, because it allows grants to be provided to artists to do placemaking activities within their community, or it allows communities to suggest ideas and recommend some placemaking ideas, and then the council would say, okay, let's do this with you, right? So that's the idea of the top-down policy that starts placemaking at the grassroots.
Okay, well, finding a champion is the key, or maybe a backer. I'm just kidding. Okay, so shall we entertain another question? Okay, so coming from architect,
Yeah.
I think this has been discussed already. But if you have additional thoughts on the question.
Yeah, so I think what I would like to share is the experience here in Melbourne on how strategic placemaking has been integrated into the different. So it's not, all over Melbourne, but some cities have adopted. So they have the flexibility or the freedom to adopt it or not, right? So Gilbert is one of the placemakers here in in Melbourne, and so he started off the placemaking movement. So, for example, Project for Public Spaces started it off in New York in the 70s. Here in Melbourne, one of the key players in placemaking is Gilbert of Village Well. So back in 1992, the problem that Melbourne was facing was nighttime economy was not present. So there were a lot of, negative urban decay was happening, and negative things were happening during evening. So the government was saying, the local council was saying, we need to do something about the nighttime situation, right, in Melbourne. So at that point in time, Gilbert was trying to introduce, I think, advocating, more green into the city. So for instance, at one point in time, they have actually put in fake grass along along a stretch of street and closed it off and did some activities, events within that long stretch of fake grass. And so they did this intermittently, right? So it wasn't just one off. So, after a few months they did something else, and then after a few months they did something else. And then what it actually did was it invited and attracted more people into the city. And so the idea about, the events attracting people to, to participate and engage in these activities and bring them to the city, to the downtown area, to the CBD. And so they said, what if we, think about activities during nighttime or during the evenings, right? So, and that started off, okay, let's bring, the cafe it actually started the cafe culture, coffee shops in Melbourne. And so there were different interventions that were then brought into Melbourne. And because of this, we now have a very, a thriving nighttime economy. And in doing so, it actually does not only have economic value, but it actually has a cultural significance, right? So, Melbourne is well known for its coffee. So it's, cafes, very good cafes, and also of its laneways, of its arts, Melbourne laneways. So, because of those things, placemaking, small fragmented placemaking that was happening, it actually now became, something that is a cultural asset for the city. So in a way, because they saw the benefit through those small interventions, several cities have adopted strategic placemaking. So they actually have a policy about encouraging placemaking in their own city. So City of Greater Dandenong has one. I don't. City of Melbourne, of course, has one. I'm not sure which cities have the same policy in place.
Okay, another question, I guess. All right. Thank you, Dr. Mateo-Babiano. I strongly agree that in placemaking, community is the expert. But what if the community doesn't have a unified vision for a public space project? How can we balance out conflicting interests of these different groups? Have you encountered this problem in your practice? Architect Juan Ismael Vallejo, UAP Alabang chapter.
Thank you very much for the question, Architect Vallejo. So of course, as maybe I wasn't able to mention, but yes, we need to consider the different stakeholders, not just the shareholders, right? So it's different stakeholders, and we need to also consider all the voices. So the voiceless groups are as important if they have a huge stake of the space. And how do we then engage with them? And of course, these different stakeholders, when they come into the table, they would have different motivations, they would have different agendas, and they would have different, what is in it for them, right? So they always ask that question, and I think it's that communication, and I think it's just understanding what is the outcome that we want at the very end, and finding that common ground is as important as a strategy that would lead us to that common ground. So for instance, is it about a public space that would engage many? Is it a public space that would allow intercultural interaction, encounters? So is it a public space that would celebrate what's this, multiculturalism, for example? So I think understanding what is the common ground that is amenable for everyone is important to as a starting point. And then based on this, we now have the ability to find a strategy to engage with them, to engage with different groups. And of course, it's not our job, actually. It's our job to bring them to the table, but it's actually their job to then discuss and come up with a common platform or a common starting point in how do we see this public space. Who is this for? Why are we wanting this public space in the first place? Should be deliberated, negotiated, and brokered by all of them. And it's our job to ensure that everyone who has a stake on that place are brought and are heard.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense a lot. Okay, another question. Okay, it says, have you come across situations wherein slums were developed to provide the community an appropriate, if not better, habitat, which, however, lead to place under unmaking and place masking? Joverley Pimentel.
Yes, so thank you for your question, Architect Pimentel. Yeah, so yes, definitely. So there are several examples of how place masking happened, and it happens a lot wherein we try to raise, communities, slum communities, and develop it for something else, and so it's difficult to say how we can. So this also happened, of course, in the UK when when they were trying to improve. Sorry, what was that? Canary Island? I'm not sure what Canary Wharf. Sorry, in the UK, and of course they had to displace the original settlers within that area, and I think that that led to gentrification of the area, and you see house prices and land prices in that area just went over the roof. And I'm pretty sure back in the Philippines there are a lot of these things happening, wherein we have the public land has been sold to a private company or are now being developed, and then we need to take to relocate slum settlers or informal settlements. But I think we need to also consider some examples wherein they were able to successfully do it. For example, in Curitiba, Brazil, back in the 80s, I think 70s, 80s, wherein their mayor saw that the importance of informal settlements, because they're there because they have they have value to the economy, to the local economy, and they have a role to play. So the people living in informal settlements are not parasites of society. They are there because they provide some form of some function to the city, right? So they are probably, some of them are our teachers, some of them are students, some of them are employees in companies, right? So they actually provide benefits into our community. So Jamie Lerner, the mayor of then then mayor of Curitiba, Brazil, saw this benefit. And so when there were plans of developing housing communities in this relocation in informal settlements in Curitiba, Brazil, he required that at least 10 or 20% of the area should be allocated for social housing. And also, he has several projects in place, not just placemaking, to encourage cleanliness within these informal settlements. So engaging with them. So one of these projects that I really think is very clever is when so that informal settlements are areas that are difficult to pass through because they don't have roads, or sometimes alleys are very narrow. So to ensure that waste management has been the waste management within that area is maintained. So what he did was every Tuesday, I think, so a certain day in a week, he would not he personally, but the waste management of the local council or local government would go to the area and swap fruits with the trash. So for each kilogram of trash that they would provide, they would then get a kilo of banana, for example, or some fruits and vegetables. So in a way, it actually it's like killing one bird, killing one stone. What was the saying? Killing two birds with one stone. so it's not just about ensuring cleanliness, but it's also about health and well-being. So healthy lifestyles within those informal settlements. So there are several interventions that are, there are several case study examples that we could look into and see how we can, bring those ideas into enhancing informal settlements, informal communities in the Philippines. Not sure if I've answered your question. I haven't personally come across that, but I have come across stories about, how we can rehabilitate or improve informal settlements.
Okay. All right. And I think we have the last question for today's session. Is this the last question, press mark? Or two more? Okay. This is a comment in need of your opinion and advice as well. So there's a disclaimer. How can we effectively bring about placemaking if our government's priority task is for counter-insurgency of this current virus crisis? And even if this crisis is finally over, government will definitely be focusing and investing their effort and all other resources in restoring what was destroyed or destabilized, including the livelihoods of all people. And so our aspiration of placemaking will be forgotten or set aside for good. Architect Rogelio Santos Jr., UAP Baraswain chapter.
I hope it doesn't, lead to that. So I think if we are able to, if we are able to frame placemaking as something that would be about job creation, if we are able to frame placemaking as having, if we could align it with how the government is discussing what a post-COVID world would be, then there is possibility that I'm pretty sure that placemaking is something that would be an important strategy in enhancing place. Because, for instance, now what we are talking about is really on how we can utilize our sidewalks, how we can utilize our underutilized public spaces into something that's possible in this COVID condition, right? So in that sense, we are actually trialing and testing ideas on how we can transform public space to become more people places, and instead of car spaces. right? Because we saw that it's not really possible to, that people are really going. Not everyone owns car in the Philippines. About 80 to 90% commutes or would prefer bicycles or walking than taking even taking public transport, right? So how can we cater for these people? And this is how we need to think about placemaking as a strategy to think of the potential of place. If we are able to frame it as a strategy and definitely, a tool to be able for us to think of the potential of place, then it would remain. It would still be there. And it's not about, a design intervention. It's about a potential of place. And that's how placemaking should be seen, at least so for example, the community would say, actually, we don't need any design intervention. We just need, a way we can bring people to public space. So it could be, programming, it could be events, etc. So but again, it's about community and how do we bring the voice of community into the discussion. And it's important role for us, it is our important role to ensure that their voices are brought in as expert when we are discussing, interventions with government officials, with industry. Because in the end, it's not us who maintain place, it's them who ensure, who becomes custodian of place, and who become, and so we must empower them to be that in the end.
Well said. Well said. Okay. And okay, so last question. How does one remove the social stigma should a public domain be transitioned into a temporary quarantine facility? Question from Paul Eugene Ong. Very timely.
Yeah, very timely. Thank you. Thank you, Architect Ong. So so today is the first week in Melbourne. So I'm not sure if you know that in all of Australia, today is the day that well, not today, but last Tuesday was the day that we moved from 1 hour so we are still in lockdown, but we can be outside for 2 hours now instead of 1 hour. And from 8 p.m. So we cannot go out. So we have a curfew at 8 p.m. A week ago, but then from Tuesday it has now moved to 9 p.m. Right. So today and on Tuesday they started opening playgrounds. So I was at the playground a few hours ago with my kids, and so it's actually normal, right? So it's kind of amazing how it doesn't really deter people from using public space, even with the pandemic, because I think the drive to be with other people is much stronger than I think the virus. I mean, yes, virus is there, but we just have to make sure that we are following health protocols. So I don't think that there will be social stigma in using public space if we are able to design it in such a way wherein we are able to maintain our physical distance, but at the same time still socialize with our friends, with our families. And that was what kids were doing earlier, parents were doing earlier. They were talking and chatting, but with face masks, for instance. And so in a way, I don't think there would be social stigma. There will be probably hesitation at first, but I think if we are able to get the trust of the community that it's okay as long as we are following specific protocols to ensure that we are physically distancing. I think so it's just starting that whole process and encouraging or building trust with community is the key, I think.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for answering all the questions, Dr. DERLIE. And yeah, I think we have already got our time worth for all the information that you shared with us this afternoon here in the Philippines, in this case. And yeah, I guess you truly exemplify what take it from the expert is all about. And that's very helpful, I guess, for all the participants who have joined us today. And thank you so very much. And with that, and I think this virtual certificate of appreciation that we're going to give you won't even do justice for what you did this afternoon. But still, please accept this certificate as part of our Thanksgiving, I guess. It says United Architects of the Philippines, Union ng mga Arkitekto ng Pilipinas, Singapore Chapter, Certificate of Appreciation is hereby presented to Dr. DERLIE MATEO-BABIANO, Senior Lecturer, Urban Planning, Major Coordinator, Faculty of Architecture, Building and Planning, the University of Melbourne, for imparting her valuable insights and inspiration as the webinar speaker during the 15th UAPSG seminar with the theme Green Architecture, the Impact on the Living Environment, Place Making, given this 20th day of September 2020, Singapore, signed by architect Mark Lester Alcantara Valignota, UAP, President, UAP Singapore Chapter, and signed also by architect Luisito Domalaon, UAP, District Director, UAP Regional B1. So, Dr. Derley, here is your virtual certificate of appreciation. Please accept.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sean. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, UAP Singapore. And yes, so as I've mentioned earlier, please feel free to, I'm typing the website. So this is the website, placeagency.org.au. So this contains all the teaching modules that we have that we use in the different universities here in Australia. So there are 7 universities who are at the moment using different parts of this module. So they're all free downloadable PowerPoint presentations. And some of these slides that you have seen are actually there as well. So I've drawn from that. So it's part of the Creative Commons. And the only thing that's not free is a book that I've shown you. But all the other materials, PowerPoint, it also tells you how to teach placemaking, the different ideas or concepts that we have proposed, including place governance, including place leadership, including the question, how do we engage with local government and industry are also there. So if you are interested to know more about the project or want the materials, and please feel free to download them from that website. And also if you have questions, please feel free to send me an email. So I'm just adding here my email address as well. Yeah, thank you.
All right. And where can we get the book again in case we want to purchase? Or...
So Amazon, Springer, any online bookshop, you can order it and then it will be sent to you. Yeah, and it also has we also have an ebook for it if you want and if you prefer an ebook. But yeah, but you have to pay for it. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I guess that's gonna be worth all the pennies. So, yeah, thank you. And yeah, we've been getting a lot of thank you messages. It seems that they really appreciate the series and the session that we've had today. And yeah, a lot of things have been said, but still, we want to hear it from the organizer himself, our leader from the UAP Singapore chapter, for his closing remarks. So, President Mark, you're up.
Hi, good evening to all. Sorry, I prepare my speech. Okay, in response to the COVID-19 global crisis, the UAP Singapore chapter, together with the UAP Regional District Big One, is finding ways to link to the world of architecture, research, and the built environment, enhancing the digital presence through webinars that provide in-depth look into tools, products, and sustainable webinar speakers to maintain connected within our society. A joint sustainable webinar series for the green of architecture, the impact on the living environment, to our guest speakers, Architect Luther Z, Singapore, Architect Javier de Santiago of Spain, the challenges that built environment is facing every day, effects of changes caused by climate change, environmental degradation, and population growth. These challenges can be overcome only by making better, smarter, and more resilient ways. There is a need for promoting the concept of resilience in architecture through learning and advanced research and development. Overcoming challenges will increase the role of architects in creating the buildings of urban and resilience. And to our dear Dr. Derly Mateo-Babiano, Placemaking Australia. Thank you, ma'am. I've known her last 2 years when she gave talk to UAP Singapore chapter as well with Dr. Hess. So placemaking can be used to preserve, restore, and improve historic urban form to help contribute to the character of important historic buildings or structures, reach beyond economic growth and the improvement of the facilities in a community or region, and can have impact on design, community engagement, and the performance of local governments. Actually, in reality kasi, di ba, um, last time when she talked about placemaking, I don't have idea about that. So I'm just being honest. And this research and knowledge that we've gained from Dr. Derley is sustainable for us, especially architects, because you're helping us promote placemaking that Philippines should have advanced their creating more sufficient and sustainable placemaking for our country as well. So this webinar series is about relevant ideas and knowledges that our keynote speakers sharing their expertise and advocacies for us to stay connected and united. So thanks to my B1 district, to Singapore chapter, Manila Artesonian, Manila Atelier, Manila Centrum, Manila Metro chapter, Santa Mesa, Sampaloc, and Singapore. And I just want to thank our dear Dr. Maria Sheila Conejos for helping us out with our keynote speakers to connect and have linkage, having all those expertise and speakers that we've had for the month-long end of September 2020. To District Director B1 Luisito Dumalaon for the support system and assistance to our regional district, to UAP Singapore Chapter Committee Head, Architect Jay Mendoza for Green Architecture, and to my BOD. And to all the different chapters, students, and those who have been part of this month-long Green Sustainable Series, your participation is much appreciated as we also provide CSR. That's why what we've had here in a webinar series from our sponsors, I told my district director to we just contribute to our back in the Philippines for supporting our fellow Filipinos. So indeed, I'm happy. We are happy. UAP Singapore chapter and B1 district is happy to be able to offer a variety of live webinars. So cheers, mabuhay, stay connected, stay united, Majula Singapore.
Majula, Singapore, and I am happy too. Thank you very much, Architect Mark Valignata, UAP Singapore Chapter President. And yeah, so we're almost done. And as part of our tradition, we are now going to post the survey, the poll. And again, make sure that you fill out the items being asked there. So if you think that the seminar has met the objectives and the duration of the seminar was appropriate for the learning process, please rate us and don't forget to click submit because again, your opinion and your voice matters. So yeah. And we have another webinar series coming. It's going to be the last webinar series for the month of September. I hope this is not the last for me, but yeah, it's on September 26th. That's going to be from 5 until 8 p.m. And we will have topics talking about improving wellness through vertical greenery, a decade of practical green lessons learned. So I, I think at this point we have 101 participants, so we're looking forward to all of you being, joining us again in the next webinar series. And yeah, President Mark, do we have other ads, promotions?
Yes. Wait, I'm checking my teka lang natataranta lang. Wait lang. Okay, teka lang ah. Okay. So this is our last event for next week. Okay. Next is Uy, ba't ayaw umandar? Wait lang ah. Sorry.
All right, so there.
We're done.
Okay, so yeah, again, guys, we'll see you again next week. And thank you once again to all our sponsors, to all the participants. Uh, Architect Derly, we'll see you soon again. Thank you so very much. I'll remember that triangle: people, space, and ecology. Did I get it right? All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, guys. As flash on the screen, all the participants who have just joined us today, maraming salamat. And yeah, well, stay safe. God bless everybody. See you again next week. Good night.
Thanks all. Thanks, Dr. Derly. Thank you, Sir Jonathan. Don't worry, it won't be the last.
Most welcome. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Tatawaran ka namin, Char. Stay muna yung board ko ulit. Saglit na lang. 5 minutes talaga, promise. May pag-uusapan lang tayo. Thank you, guys. Thanks to all.
Bye.
Bye, sir. Hi, Sir Romel. You can, to all, you can turn on your mic, then just say hi. But for my board, you stay long.
You say bye.
Bye. Shout out to
Bye,
Greg.
baby. Bye, baby girl.
You say bye.
Bye.
What's your dinner?
What's your name? Sarah.
Sarah. J. Bernardo.
Hi, Sarah. What's your dinner?
Egg.
Wow.
Ham.
Wow, breakfast.
Rice. I like apple and banana.
Wow, you're wearing a Wonder Woman shirt.
Yeah. Nice. Oh. Say
So
good
pretty.
night.
Bye.
Bye, baby. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
Makati CBD, Ma'am Ruth.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night. You sleep well, study hard, and stay home.
You say bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, so sa board ko, guys.
Yes, sir.
Tatlo lang ata tayo, guys.
Yes, sir.
Ay, teka, may mga tao pa. Teka lang, ha. Goodbye po sa mga others. Attendees, bye. Teka lang. Okay. Ay,